The clash of blades thundered through the chasm like gods at war. Kale's ashen blade met Riven's jagged edge in a storm of sparks and pressure. Their auras screamed, one burning with purpose, the other howling with chaos. The shockwave cracked the cursed stone beneath them, spiderweb fractures racing across the battlefield. "You're not like me," Kale growled, shoving forward as his aura flared in heat and light. Riven grinned beneath his half-mask. "No, I'm what you were meant to be." With a twist, Riven broke their lock and drove a knee into Kale's chest. The blow sent him skidding back, breath ragged. Pain bloomed in his ribs, but he stayed standing, barely. Riven advanced, steps deliberate, aura boiling. "You've stolen fragments. Beast flame, celestial light, mist abyss. You devour aura like a starving god, but you lack conviction." Kale's grip tightened around his sword. "And what do you have?" "Freedom." Riven's aura erupted, twisted, unholy. Ash, abyss, and blood fused into a storm of crimson decay. "I killed my tether. Burn my past. There's no humanity left to weigh me down." Kale straightened, eyes hard. "Then I'll show you what a burden's worth." Kale surged forward, aura igniting in a maelstrom. Ashen, beast flame, celestial light, fusing into a storm of fire and gold. Every step shook the earth. Every swing roared with memory and defiance. Riven met him head-on, their blades colliding in a rhythm older than words. Each clash sparked like lightning. Each movement was a duel of philosophies, freedom against purpose, chaos against will. On the sidelines, Drake leaned against the rubble, bloodied but grinning. "Now that's a fight." Zara, her wraith bell glowing faintly, watched without expression. "It's not just a fight," she murmured. "It's a mirror." Lyra knelt nearby, light pooling around her hands. "He can win this, if he doesn't lose himself doing it." Kale's aura pulsed violently. The ashen energy writhed, hungry, evolving with every clash. It wasn't reacting, it was learning. New skill unlocked, Revenant Echo. Creates a phantasmal clone formed from absorbed enemy aura traits. Mimics attacks at 80% power. Duration, 15ths. Cooldown, 5M. Kale smirked through blood and grit. "Let's see how you handle your own shadow." He activated the skill. Behind Riven, a spectral figure emerged, his perfect reflection. Same stance, same blade, same fury. Riven's eyes widened for the first time. "What?" The clone struck from behind. Riven spun to block, just in time for Kale's real blade to smash across his mask, cracking it clean down the middle. Riven reeled, blood streaming down his face. Kale stepped forward, aura flaring brighter than ever. "You're not the only one who adapts." "A beat. You were born of ruin. I was forged in it." Riven roared and unleashed everything. A storm of black-red lightning engulfed the battlefield, tearing the chasm apart. And, through the chaos, Kale walked forward, unshaken. His blade burned white-hot, cutting through the storm like dawn through smoke. "Stay down." One strike. A single, devastating slash that split air, earth, and aura alike. Riven dropped to one knee, blood spilling through his cracked mask. "You were supposed to fall," he rasped. "You were meant to break." Kale stood over him, eyes steady. "I did." A pause. "That's why I'm stronger." He turned and walked away. Aftermath. The chasm was silent again, save for the crackle of fading energy. Zara stood over Riven's fallen form, her voice low. "He's still breathing." Kale looked down, unreadable. Lyra glanced between them. "What do we do with him?" "Keep him alive," Kale said. "He has answers. Maybe even redemption." Drake scoffed. "You think monsters like that can change?" Kale met his gaze. "I did." No one replied. Later, Lyriel's divide. Night fell. The ruins glowed faintly under a pale, crimson sky. The second sigil ignited in the heart of the divide, ancient glyphs burning across the stone. Kale pressed his palm against it. The sigil pulsed, and visions flooded his mind. Cities burning, Eternals walking the mortal plane, shadows spreading across the continents, and a voice. "Three have awakened. For remain." Kale staggered back, breath unsteady. "We're running out of time." Zara stood behind him, her cloak swaying in the ember wind. Her eyes gleamed faintly beneath the hood. Then we stopped waiting. She turned toward the horizon, where distant lights burned like falling stars. Let's take the war to them. The sigil pulsed beneath Cale's palm. Energy surged outward, racing through the veins of the ruined temple like blood through a dying heart. Ancient glyphs, buried beneath centuries of ash and silence, blazed alive in gold and crimson. Shadows danced along the cracked walls, restless, whispering, alive. The air shimmered. The world itself seemed to breathe. Something beneath the surface was stirring, aware of his intrusion. Cale stood motionless in the center of the glyph. His aura trembled, caught between harmony and rejection. Lyra stepped closer, hand tied around her sun veil feather, but said nothing. This wasn't her moment to speak. Then, a voice slid into Cale's mind. Familiar, cold, infinite. You disturbed the order, little revenant. Cale didn't flinch. Good. This seal is not meant for your kind. You are no scion. You are a splinter. Then I'm more than you expected. The sigil cracked, and something beneath the temple woke. The next morning, Lyriel's divide. The team gathered at the temple's edge. Riven sat slumped in the corner, bound by chains woven from Drake's condensed aura and Lyra's light constructs. His mask was gone, revealing a deep, mist-seeping scar across his cheek. Zara stood nearby, her gaze unreadable. He touched the second sigil. Drake leaned forward, and Cale stepped from the shadows, eyes faintly glowing ash-gray. We just challenged the throne of the third eternal. Silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. Lyra's voice wavered. The eclipse I dreamed about, that wasn't a nightmare, was it? Cale nodded. It was a warning. Location. Zenith's reach, outer sanctum. Far above Aurenia, beyond the clouds, where the air turned to crystal and light fractured into endless prisms, stood the eclipse spire. A fortress built into the spine of the world. A citadel wrapped in eternal dusk. And upon a throne of obsidian wings, the third eternal stirred. Once she'd had a name. Now, history knew her only as Veltharis, the hollow crown. Her eyes opened, pale and endless, as she gazed south, toward where Cale had touched her seal. Another dares? Her voice echoed through stone and sky alike. From the shadows behind her, winged revenants knelt, motionless. Sigils glowed across their flesh, binding them in servitude. Veltharis rose. Her silhouette, framed against the fractured horizon, resembled both angel and corpse. She lifted a clawed hand. The sky cracked. Let the sky fall. Back at Lyriel's divide. I need to enter the rift line, Cale said. Zara's head turned sharply. That's suicide. No, Cale replied, his voice like iron. It's progression. The rift line. A tear between worlds where aura storms were born and reality itself frayed at the edges. No one had ever entered its core and returned whole. Cale didn't care. The hollow crown will send her scions soon, he said. I need power that isn't stolen. Power that's earned. Drake crossed his arms. Then I'm coming with you. Cale frowned. You'd follow me into that. Drake smirked. If you die before I beat you fair, I'll never forgive you. Zara sighed. Fine. I'll open a path. But once inside, your auras will be stripped bare. Remember what you are before you forget. Inside the rift line, Cale stepped into a world that screamed. The air howled sideways. The ground folded like paper. Colors bled together into impossible shades. Memories and time collapsing around him. Fragments of broken gods drifted past. Echoes of dying hunters called out from the void. His aura flared instinctively, fighting to anchor him. But then, he heard it. A heartbeat. Deep within the storm. He followed. Each step stripped away part of him. Celestial light dimmed. Beast flame flickered. Even the mist began to fade. He didn't resist. He let them go, until he stood bare. At the storm's center waited a monument of ash and bone. And before it, his younger self. Small, weak, lost. Why do you fight? The boy asked. Cale stayed silent. Why do you cling to pain? Cale met his own gaze. Because pain was the first thing that was mine, he said quietly. And because I turned it into power. The rift answered. His aura detonated outward, raw, pure, no longer borrowed or broken. The ash blazed white, then black, then something beyond both. Ashen Dominion, true sync form, Revenant King. Your aura no longer adapts from fear. It commands. His blade changed, obsidian and light entwining into a single edge. A crown of shadow flared above his head, cracked, then dissolved into a burning sigil across his chest. Kale turned back toward the rift's exit. At the edge, Drake waited, breathing hard, aura flickering from the strain. Took you long enough. Kale smiled, faint but certain. Had to reclaim a few things. Drake grinned. You ready? Kale stepped past him, the storm quiet behind them. Let's go break a throne.
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
The wind howled across the spires of Lyriel's Divide, but the usual chill was gone, replaced by something heavier. Anticipation. From the cliffside observatory, Kale stood silently, eyes locked toward Zenith's reach. Though the mountain loomed beyond sight, he could feel her, the hollow crown, her aura brushing against his own like cold iron scraping bone. Below, preparations had begun. The Sunspire vanguard mobilized in secret. Lyra had called in what remained of her old unit, despite her doubts in the system they once swore to uphold. Drake roamed the outskirts with his infernal gauntlets glowing crimson, his flames unnaturally calm, controlled, ready. And Zera vanished again, because of course he did. Location: Sunspire Vanguard encampment. Within the command tent, a rough map of Arena was spread across the table. 3 crimson pins marked confirmed Scion appearances. Drake slammed his fist next to the third. That one nearly tore through an entire rank of Vanguard. If Kale hadn't intervened. I didn't stop it, Kale interrupted. I delayed it. Lyra's hand hovered over the central mark. And what if all 3 converge at Zenith's reach? What if they're meant to be sacrifices for something larger? Like awakening the hollow crown fully, Kale said grimly. She nodded. That eclipse in my dream, it wasn't just a metaphor. I think it's part of a ritual. Drake cracked his neck. Then we interrupt the damn ritual. Lyra smiled faintly. You make it sound so simple. Because complicated plans get people killed. Kale looked at both of them. We move tomorrow. First light. Later that night, on the ridge. Kale sat alone. The stars above flickered like candle flames. Unsteady, as though the sky itself felt the unease stirring. Zera appeared beside him, soundless as always. You'll lose something in this battle, Zera said softly. I've already lost too much. Not death, Kale. Something worse. Something quieter. Kale didn't respond. The fire in his eyes flickered. You're not afraid, Zera noted. Kale glanced at him. Not of dying. Then what? Of winning. And still feeling empty. Zera stared at him, face unreadable behind his half-mask. The Eternals, they feel nothing. Because they've won too many times. And with that, he faded once more into mist. Dawn. Vanguard forward march. The march began with no war cries, no fanfare. Just steady boots on soil. Kale led the vanguard down toward Zenith's reach, cloaked in ash and silence. He wore no armor, only the sigil etched across his chest, pulsing with the Ashen Dominion. Beside him, Drake cracked his gauntlets. Each step he took left scorch marks on the stone. Lyra floated above them briefly, wings of radiant solar light unfolding. Her aura shimmered with celestial resolve, even as fear curled inside her gut. In the distance, thunder rumbled, not from a storm, but from something rising. Scions. 3 of them, each one marked with the symbol of Veltharis. And one wore Kale's face. The first clash, Twin Ash. The imposter stepped forward. It looked like Kale. Same height, same expression, but wrong. Its aura was twisted. Not ashen, but hollow ash. Kale summoned his blade. The Revenant King versus the Mock King. They clashed with a sound like time cracking, Kale's blade carving through false memories and counterfeit aura. "You think you are me," Kale growled. "I'm what you left behind," the doppelganger hissed. "Your mercy, your doubt, your humanity. I didn't leave it behind. I buried it where you couldn't reach." He struck with soul scorch, his aura flaring into a spiral of flame and ash, burning through illusions. The fake Kale screamed and vanished into smoke. Second front, celestial burn. Meanwhile, Lyra faced a scion cloaked in starless light, a nullcaster, immune to healing, feeding on faith. The scion raised a hand and unraveled the light around them. Lyra winced, holding her relic tight. "Sun Veil Feather," she whispered, "don't let me fall." Then she cast Solar Aegis, a barrier that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, deflecting the Orinol field just long enough for her to retaliate. She pointed her staff skyward and cried, "Radiant Descent." A beam of solar flame shot down like judgment itself, slicing through the field of void. The nullcaster crumbled, light burning from the inside out. Third front, Beast Inferno. Drake didn't bother with flare. He charged. The scion before him was a bestial hulk of obsidian and shadow, a monster that moved like a predator and fought like a storm. Drake grinned. Finally, they collided like tectonic plates. Flame versus shadow. Muscle versus monstrosity. Each blow from Drake melted the stone beneath them. He bellowed his line with a manic grin. "If I can't burn it, I'll break it. If I can't break it, well, I'll still try." His infernal gauntlets flared white-hot as he activated Beast-Hard Ascendancy. His final tears sank with the flame beast sealed within. He didn't just burn the scion. He erased it. Eclipsed Spire, Final Descent. The trio regrouped at the shattered gates of the spire. Above them, the eclipse began. Veltharis stood at the highest balcony, wings of dusk unfurled. Her crown glowed with pale, silver fire. She raised one hand. Chains of void descended from the sky. Kale narrowed his eyes. "She's binding the sun itself." Lyra gasped as her aura flickered. Kale gripped his blade. "Then we unbind it." And together, they ascended the spiral of dusk toward the hollow crown. The sky over Noctheron cracked with a thunderous roar. Not thunder. Aura. Raw, unfiltered aura that tore through the clouds like a divine blade. A pulse rippled from the heart of the marsh, washing through the swampy wasteland with the force of a tidal wave, bending trees, cracking the earth, and silencing the monsters that called this cursed place home. At the epicenter stood Kale Arclight, chest bare, body scorched, eyes glowing like a dying star reborn. His aura flared, no longer just ashen, but pulsing with fused embers of something far more ancient. He wasn't breathing heavily. He was breathing deep. He exhaled, voice low, calm, dangerous. His eyes locked on the towering eternal spawn in front of him. What a strong aura. The creature, a twisted abomination of sinew, shadow, and golden bone, let out a screeching wail. It towered over Kale, easily 3 stories high, its long, insectoid arms dragging behind it like skeletal spears. Its body shimmered with an unstable fusion of abyssal and celestial aura, a contradiction that should not have existed. But it did, because the Eternals broke the rules. And so would Kale. "Kale!" Lyra's voice pierced through the chaos as she slid down a cracked tree trunk, shielding herself with the Sun Veil Feather. Golden light flared around her as she caught sight of him, different now, terrifyingly so. "You can't handle this alone. That's a full-class Eternal spawn." Kale didn't answer. His eyes didn't leave the creature. Zara, perched on a jagged spire of stone nearby, narrowed her eyes. "He's going to push beyond the limit again. Tisich, stupid, brilliant fool." Drake Nor, bloodied but grinning, leaned on his infernal gauntlets. "If he dies, I'm taking his kill." "Over my dead aura," Lyra snapped. "Exactly." Kale stepped forward. 1 foot. The marsh sizzled. 2. The air vibrated. He wasn't just walking. He was tuning. His aura, once a swirling mass of gray and black, now shimmered with flecks of flame, light, and something else, mist. Ashen Fusion, Core Sync, Blade Soul plus Revenant plus Mist Echo. Effect: temporarily grants Kale the ability to phase through non-divine attacks, gain aura echoes of recent deaths in the area, and duplicate a portion of enemy aura for 10 seconds. Time limit: 45 seconds. Cooldown: 1 week. Kale vanished. A blink. Not teleportation, not speed. Just pure aura displacement. He appeared on the Eternal Spawn's shoulder, blade forged from ash and essence drawn in a rising arc. Clang. The creature swatted, but Kale passed through the limb, slicing cleanly through an aura core embedded beneath its collar. Screech. The world trembled. Kale landed on the ground, sliding backward, boots digging trenches into mud and stone. He wasn't done. Lyra, Kale called, his voice sharper now, commanding. Cover Drake. What about you? I'll deal with this one. Lyra bit her lip. She could feel the weight in his voice. The pain. The acceptance. Don't die, she whispered. I won't. The Eternal Spawn shifted forms, body elongating, dozens of wings sprouting from its back, seraphic yet rotted. A new power surged from it. Domain expansion, cradle of collapse. Black petals rained down. A dome of shifting reality enclosed them. Within it, gravity inverted, time stuttered, and vision warped. Drake slammed a fist into the ground outside the dome. Damn it. He's in. Kale, Zara murmured. Let's see how far you've come. Inside the domain. Kale stood still, breathing, feeling, sensing. The world shifted violently around him, but he remained anchored. His eyes slowly adjusted. Through the fractal chaos, he saw flickers of memory. The faces of the fallen, the monsters he had slain, the people he couldn't save. All of them, watching, judging. He raised his blade. Ashen Veil, Form 2, Soul Reclaimer. Aura surged like a hurricane. The domain shuddered. Kale struck. Once. Twice. A flurry of silent cuts. Each swing cleaved through space, memory time. The Eternal Spawn reeled. Kale's blade glowed, siphoning echoes. A child's laughter. A soldier's scream. A healer's prayer. He absorbed them all. Revenant Requiem. Final call. Kale exploded into motion, his aura flaring into a towering wraith of ash and light. He dashed upward, blade overhead, body glowing from the inside out. The creature roared, releasing a beam of pure destruction, abyssal, celestial surge. Kale didn't dodge. He screamed, clashed. The impact ruptured the dome. The sky shattered. A rain of light poured down. Silence followed. Then, a heartbeat. When the dust cleared, Kale stood alone, his blade stabbed into the cracked skull of the Eternal Spawn. His chest heaved. Blood leaked from his side. But his eyes, they burned brighter than ever. Status, he muttered. Aura sync. 92%. Aura rank. S. Blade Soul Revenant Hybrid. New skill unlocked. Ashen Eclipse. Passive boost in all stats when fighting Eternals. Active. Channel soul echoes of fallen allies for 15 seconds. You have defeated an Eternal Spawn. Godhood Path Progress. 1%. Kale pulled the blade free. Drake was the first to reach him. You done showing off? Kale gave him a half-smile. You jealous? Only of your kill count. Lyra ran over, placing a hand on his chest. You're hurt. I'm alive. Zara appeared beside them, silent as mist. One down, many more to go. Kale looked to the horizon. Nocturne sky was still cracked, but light peeked through. One step closer, he said, eyes narrowing, to breaking the chains. From the remains of the Eternal Spawn, a flickering crystal rose. Black, pulsing. The battlefield still trembled. Mist seeped low across the ground. Remnants of the Eternal Spawn's corrupted aura dissolving into nothing. Above them, the sky had started to clear, revealing slivers of moonlight bleeding through shredded clouds. Kale stood in the ruins of what had once been a grove, ash coating his shoulders like war paint, his blade humming faintly in the silence. His ashen aura still crackled, even if barely contained. Flares of black and ember flickered around his limbs, refusing to settle. Behind him, Drake limped out of a smoldering crater, face bloodied but grinning like a madman. That was beautiful, he muttered, leaning on one of the fractured infernal gauntlets. You almost roasted the whole damn swamp. Cale didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. His chest heaved with uneven breaths. Not from exhaustion. His body had already begun recovering, but from something deeper. Something that stirred every time he pushed past the threshold. Every time he leaned too far into that fusion state. Lyra approached slowly. The sun veil feather hovered beside her shoulder, its radiant light dim but steady. She knelt next to Cale, placing a hand on his arm. You almost lost yourself again. I didn't. His voice was hoarse, but resolute. No, but you're getting closer every time you do that. He didn't argue. Couldn't. She was right. Each use of ashen fusion left something behind, like his humanity shedding in flakes with every clash, every kill. But the cost was necessary, because they were getting stronger, and the enemies weren't waiting. Zara appeared last, emerging from the shadows like she was part of them. Her veil fluttered, soaked from the marsh's mist. You forced an eternal spawn to retreat into nothingness, she said. That's no small feat. They rarely die. They just fade. Then it's not over, Cale muttered. No, Zara said flatly. It never was. 2 days later, outer reach of Noctheron. The group had set up camp in the hollow remains of an old watchtower, one of the few remnants from a time when the vanguard tried to patrol the marsh. It was half submerged in moss and vine, yet sturdy enough to shield them from the storm building on the horizon. Drake snored in the corner, one leg propped against the wall. Lyra sat by a small fire, tending to a fresh cut running down her thigh. Cale was on the rooftop, watching the sky. Zara joined him without a word, carrying 2 cups of bitter tea made from swamp herbs she somehow knew weren't toxic. You've been quiet, she said. I'm thinking. That's new. He shot her a glance, but she smirked in response. You're wondering what comes next. I already know. He tightened the grip on his sword's hilt. The spawn was only a herald. There's something else buried deeper in Noctheron. Something worse. Correct. She sipped the tea. But that's not what worries you. Cale didn't answer. Not first. He studied the distant flickers of lightning across the dark marsh, his mind heavy with the memory of the last battle. How easy it had been to let go. To become something else. When I fused with the revenant aspect, he began, I saw memories that weren't mine. Zara's eyes gleamed. They weren't visions. They were real. Places. Faces. Some of them mine, but twisted. Like a version of me that walked a different path. Then the ashen is doing its job, Zara said softly. It doesn't just mimic. It learns, absorbs, adapts, including possible futures. That's not a good thing. No, she agreed. But it might be the only reason you'll survive what's coming. Midnight beneath the marsh. They moved again before dawn. Zara led the way through a network of hidden tunnels just beneath the swamp. Ancient roots and stone pathways covered in cryptic glyphs that pulsed faintly when Cale passed. At the lowest point, they found it. A sealed gate formed of fossilized bone and etched obsidian, radiating a dense, suffocating aura. This is a vault, Lyra whispered. Worse, Zara corrected. It's an echo crypt, where failed gods go to die. Cale stepped forward. The gate reacted instantly, flaring with sickly gold light. He felt something inside him resonate, like an invisible key turning within his soul. The Ashen's responding, he said. It wants to go in. Then it's your call. Zara stepped back. But whatever lies beyond that gate, it's old and angry. Cale didn't hesitate. He placed his palm on the center glyph. It burned. The gate screamed. And then it opened. The inside of the echo crypt was a vortex of echoes, whispers of long-dead warriors, failed ascendants, and discarded Eternals who had outlived their purpose. The walls pulsed with aura residue, so thick it shimmered in the air like smoke. Drake flinched. This place reeks of regret. No, Lyra said, voice tight. Of power. They walked down a spiral path, each step deeper, unraveling layers of presence. Cale's aura flickered erratically, reacting to the remnants of forgotten gods that clung to the stone. And then they found it. At the heart of the crypt was a throne made of fractured etherium, floating just above a shallow pool of blackened ichor. Upon it sat a figure, draped in chains of dying starlight, unmoving. A voice echoed, not from the being, but from the throne itself. "You are not yet God, but you wear his hunger." Kale stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I am Vestige, memory of what should not have been." The chained figure lifted its head. Kale saw his own face, aged, broken, eyes hollow with power uncontained. It was him, a future that had lost everything. "You're the cost," Kale said. "I am your cost," the Vestige replied. "Unless you break the chain." Kale raised his blade. "Then prove your will." The throne shattered. The crypt exploded with energy, and the battle began. The clash echoed through the crypt like a funeral bell. Kale lunged forward, blade drenched in ashen light, clashing against his other self, the Vestige. The impact fractured the throne's remains, aura, shrapnel scattering like obsidian stars. Sparks flew where steel met steel, but it wasn't just a contest of strength. It was identity unraveling. The Vestige looked identical to Kale, same silver-white hair, same ember glow in his eyes, but twisted by time, by loss. His aura bled apathy. Purpose drained long ago, replaced by cold precision. "You think you can stop me?" Kale shouted, twisting midair, lashing a streak of ashen flame. Vestige Kale caught it with bare hands, aura flaring around him like a dying star. "I don't need to. I am you. I already made every choice you're afraid to. Then let's rewrite them." Outside the crypt, Drake, Lyra, and Zera stood at the edge of the gate, unable to follow. "Why can't we move in?" Drake growled, fist clenched. The moment he crossed the threshold, Zera said, eyes narrowed, the trial began. "It's an internal domain now. A soul duel. Ash versus Ash," Lyra whispered, watching the swirling vortex of energy inside. "But if he kills that version of himself," Zera nodded grimly, "he doesn't just win. He inherits everything. Power, memory weight, even his regrets." Within the trial, Ashen Domain unleashed. Kale soared backward as the Vestige erupted into motion. Chains of aura snaked out from his arms. Ashen tendrils turned into solid whips, each one tipped with blades forged from despair. They danced like serpents, striking with impossible speed. Kale activated Burnout Dash, vanishing in a streak of scorched shadow. He reappeared behind the Vestige, slashing a clean arc, but his blade passed through mist. Misstep echo. Vestige Kale appeared behind him instead, driving a crimson dagger toward Kale's spine. Kale barely twisted aside, feeling the blade graze his ribs. "He's faster, better, smarter." But Kale smirked. "Good. I've fought worse," Kale muttered, voice darkening as his aura roared to life. He activated Soul Scorch. A wave of blazing spectral fire erupted from his chest, taking the shape of a skeletal dragon wreathed in ashen flame. The domain trembled. Even the crypt walls flickered, warping from the sheer intensity. Vestige Kale didn't flinch. Instead, he opened his arms. "Then burn with me." And he let himself be consumed. Flashback within the Vestige's memories, fragmented echoes. Kale staggered mid-fight as his mind was suddenly torn into a stream of visions. Drake falling to a sword not his own. Lyra, impaled by radiant chains. Zera, crumbling into mist, betrayed. A world drowning in Eternals, and Kale standing atop their corpses, alone, monstrous, victorious, and utterly hollow. The vision shattered. Back in the real domain, the Vestige was bleeding, but still smiling. "You think you can keep them safe without losing yourself?" he asked, voice like broken glass. "You'll have to sacrifice more than your humanity." Kale didn't reply. He tightened his grip on his sword and stepped forward, slowly. "No," he said. "I just have to remember who I'm fighting for." Kale's domain shifts. The Ashen Domain trembled, and then evolved. It no longer resembled a crypt. It transformed into something else. A field of ruins under a dying sun. But this time there were voices. Drake, Lyra, Zera. Their echoes stood behind Kale, not illusions but memory bonds. His version of them. Not dead. Not lost. Kale's aura exploded upward. New skill. Ashen Reclaim. Draw power from bonds preserved in memory, reinforcing soul core against existential corruption. He surged forward, empowered by their echoes, his aura spiking higher than it had ever gone. He roared, blade raised. I won't become you. Not ever. Final clash. The vestige met his charge head-on, aura snapping into a skeletal crown and full-blown wings made of scorched resolve. Both Kales collided, shockwaves tearing through the soul space. Time fractured. Every slash was a debate of futures. Every parry was a denial of fate. Every wound bled history. In the final moment, Kale inverted his grip, feinting low, then slamming his sword into the vestige's chest as he uttered a single word. Ashen End. Boom! The blast engulfed the chamber. The echo screamed, and then silence. Aftermath. Reclamation. Kale stood in the stillness, trembling, blade still glowing. The body of the vestige faded, not into ash, but into starlight. It streamed into Kale's core, absorbed, accepted. He didn't reject that part of himself. He integrated it. Level up. Soul tier evolution unlocked. Ashen aura advanced to phase 2. Eclipse form. New skill acquired. Vestige chain. Temporarily channel the strength and foresight of alternate selves during high-risk moments. He stumbled forward, exhausted, soul raw, but victorious. Outside the crypt, moments later, the sealed gate split open. Kale walked out, steam rising off his shoulders. His blade was sheathed, his aura calm, but deeper, darker, and more refined. Lyra ran to him immediately. Are you? I'm here, he said. Which you? Drake asked with a grin. Kale looked up. The only one left. Zara just smiled faintly. Then we can move on. The vault deeper in Noctheron waits. And now, you have what it takes. Kale nodded. No more fragments. No more hesitation. The war against the Eternals was far from over. But he had just passed the first trial of godhood. The skies over Noctheron bled gray. A storm loomed beyond the marshlands, casting long shadows across the veil of ancient trees and damp earth. It wasn't rain they feared, but silence. That stillness in the air, the type that came before the world itself decided to scream. Kale Arclight stood at the edge of a broken monolith trail, his blade resting on his shoulder, aura low but simmering. Behind him, Drakenor clicked his gauntlets together, heat flaring off his knuckles. Lyra adjusted her hood, eyes fixed on the creeping fog. Zara was already steps ahead, cloak trailing like living ink. We're close, Zara said, eyes glowing faintly. The vault sleeps beneath the third tombstone. We dig, or bleed, our way in. Kale narrowed his eyes. And what are we expecting down there? Zara glanced back with a ghost of a grin. A guardian who doesn't forget. The tomb route, layered trial of the vault. The team followed Zara's path toward what looked like a broken shrine carved into a hill of mossy bone. Symbols etched in forgotten tongues lined the stones. This place reeks of old aura, Drake muttered. Dead souls, maybe? Regrets, Lyra corrected. The vault feeds on them. Kale approached the entrance. The air felt heavier the closer they got, like memories trying to sink into his bones. He placed his hand on the tombstone. A glyph flared to life. Suddenly, the earth split. Chains of light and shadow burst from the stone, wrapping around Kale's arm. His eyes flashed as his aura pulsed in response. Drake pulled him back, but the chains shattered at Kale's command. A door opened beneath the shrine. A stairway spiraled downward into the dark. Ready? Kale asked. Drake smirked. You even have to ask. Inside the vault, descent into memory. As they descended, the walls changed. First stone, then bone, then blackened glass. Each step echoed with whispers. Thousands of voices murmuring names, places, regrets. Lyra's breathing quickened. It's speaking to us. No, Zara said. It's cataloging us. Kale's grip tightened. Every step felt heavier, as if the vault was testing their will. Until they reached the atrium. A massive chamber opened beneath them, shaped like an inverted cathedral. At its center was a pedestal of obsidian, and above it floated a single crystal, pulsing blue like a heartbeat. Encased within, a humanoid figure curled, unmoving. Then the whispers stopped. Something had noticed them. The guardian wakes. The crystal cracked. The chamber quaked. And from the black mist poured a figure, twice Kale's height, armored in jagged plates of silver and sorrow. Its face was veiled by a porcelain mask carved in agony. Its limbs were reinforced with living chains, each dragging behind remnants of old weapons, shattered blades, broken spears, rusted gauntlets. Trespassers, you bear no right to the vault of grief. Its voice was neither male nor female, but layered, as if thousands spoke in unison. Kale stepped forward. We're not here to steal anything. We're here to awaken what sleeps. The guardian tilted its head. Then bleed, and prove your grief weighs more than mine. Battle initiates, grief-born titan. It moved with terrifying speed, one moment across the room, the next slamming a chain-tipped fist toward Kale's chest. He blocked, aura flaring, but the sheer impact sent him skidding back. Drake howled, launching in with infernal gauntlets ablaze. He struck the creature's ribs, only to find his flames swallowed by a black mist. Aura, dampening field. Zara shouted. It feeds on emotional projection. Cut off your rage. Lyra pivoted, raising her sun veil feather. A barrier of golden light shimmered in front of Kale, just in time to block a crushing hammer blow. Kale, she shouted. We can't brute force this. He nodded, eyes narrowing. Then we don't brute force. We remember. Ashen Domain Sync initiated. Kale took a deep breath and activated Ashen Reclaim. His surroundings burned away into flickering memories, visions of battles, allies, loss. From the spectral fire emerged 3 aura echoes. Kale's father, Drake's younger self, and a forgotten face, his old team's healer, long dead. Draw strength, not from pain, but from what pain taught you. Kale's blade burned brighter, and he merged into Ashen Eclipse form. His body flickered with twin hues, ashen white and ember red, a visual contradiction of life and death, of memory and fire. He launched upward, blade angled. Skill unleashed, grave piercer slash, a vertical aura slash that cuts through emotional constructs and spectral bindings. He struck. The Titan reeled. Team sync, the core exposed. Drake, feeding off Kale's aura momentum, rechanneled his beast flame into a singular condensed spiral. He struck the Titan's knee, causing a fracture in its stance. Lyra, glowing with celestial light, whispered an incantation. Solar Requiem converts emotional grief into a shielding wave that both heals and purifies corrupted aura. Zara did something unexpected. He bowed, and a ripple of cursed mist unfurled, binding the guardian in a circle of runes laced with forgotten names. You remember all grief, but not your own. Let me show you. Wraithbell Echo, Lament of the First Seal. The Titan froze, memories pouring out of it. Children, friends, love, loss. Its armor cracked. Kale surged. He stabbed into the core crystal. Ashen end. The guardian falls. The chamber fell silent. The Titan let out a sigh, not of pain, but of release. The chains around it disintegrated. Its form dissolved into embers, not ash, and the crystal crumbled. What remained on the pedestal was not treasure, but a single word engraved in glowing script. Remember. Zara stepped forward. The vault's true purpose isn't power. Kale nodded slowly. It's to carry the weight, so others don't have to. Aftermath, the gift of the vault. As they turned to leave, a glow pulsed from the rubble. A relic emerged. Name, Griefbind Sigil. Type, Sync Relic. Effect, temporarily channels the emotional power of fallen allies and lost memories into one overwhelming burst of aura. Once per day. Kale picked it up. I'll carry it. For them. Outside, the storm over Noctheron finally broke. Rain fell, but it wasn't cold. And ahead lay the true path toward the heart of the marsh, where the next Eternal would rise. The rain hadn't stopped for hours. Thunder rolled overhead, but Kale Arclight barely noticed. His boots splashed through the marsh as he led the group forward. Behind him, Drake Nor dragged the edge of his infernal gauntlet against a wet tree trunk, bored and twitchy. "Tell me again," Drake muttered. "Why are we chasing a whisper in a swamp?" Zara Valeth answered before Kale could. "Because that whisper belongs to an eternal." Kale stopped, eyes narrowing through the fog. "What's its name?" Zara's smile faded. "Oathborn, the one who guards forgotten promises." Noctheron's heart, the marsh graveyard. The terrain changed fast. What began as creeping fog and shallow water gave way to drowned ruins. Pillars half submerged, temples leaning sideways as if bowing in mourning. Every stone they passed bore old vows, etched in dying aura. Promises of vengeance, of love, of freedom. "Why does it feel like the world's watching?" Lyra whispered, hugging herself. "Because it is," Zara said. "This entire region is a memory, a prison made by regret." Kale paused at a half-buried statue. A woman in armor, blade rusted into her hands. Words barely visible beneath the moss. "I swear, even if you forget me, I'll wait." Drake read it and clicked his tongue. "Creepy." "No," Kale said. "It's sad." Approaching the shrine of the Oathborn. At the center of the ruins, a dome of black stone pulsed with lightless aura. It didn't emit energy. It pulled it in. "Inside is the seal," Zara explained. "If we touch it, the Oathborn awakens." Lyra hesitated. "Can we really fight another Eternal? After everything in the vault?" "We don't have a choice," Kale said. "If we're going to stop the chain of awakenings, we need to confront them. All of them." "Then let's knock," Drake smirked. Awakening the Oathborn. Kale reached for the shrine's seal, a circular plate of obsidian inscribed with concentric rings of vow runes. His aura touched it, and time froze. In an instant, he stood alone in a memory. A war-torn battlefield, bodies everywhere, and at its center, a woman in white armor, long hair soaked in blood, standing over a child's corpse. "They forgot," she whispered. "I didn't." She turned. Her eyes were stitched shut, lips cracked and bleeding. "You remember too much. That's why you're here." The forgotten oath battle begins. The moment shattered. Kale's eyes snapped open, and the shrine exploded. From within rose the Oathborn, a tall, gaunt figure in flowing robes of shattered glass and black feathers. Her arms were bound by glowing chains, and her face covered in a mask of thorns. Aura spiraled around her, one of the heaviest Kale had ever felt. "I am Oathborn. I waited. I watched. I remembered. Now you will too." Combat initiated. Domain of Forgotten Vows. The entire area shifted. Reality twisted, and suddenly they weren't in the marsh, but in fragments of different memories. Kale found himself back in his childhood village, burning. Lyra stood before a vision of her first failure, her brother dying under her care. Drake faced his mother, begging him not to go into the flames. Zara was alone, in a place no one else could recognize, silent, haunted. "She's making us relive our regrets." Kale shouted. "Snap out of it." Counterattack. Echo. Reversal. Kale forced himself to stab into the illusion, his blade passing through his younger self, and everything shattered into ash. Back in the battlefield, he activated Ashen Domain. The ground beneath him cracked with aura, forming a wide dome of gray fire. He connected with Lyra and Drake through sync fusion, a temporary bond allowing amplified support. Drake roared to life, both gauntlets now fully ignited. His skill, Hellfang's Spiral, a spinning attack burning everything within a close radius. Lyra stood firm, activating Solar Beacon, a passive aura that repelled illusions and fortified willpower. Zara emerged last, eyes glowing like dying stars. "Oathborn, you chained yourself to eternity. Let me break them." Final phase, breaking the vow chains. The Oathborn screamed, not in rage but sorrow. She summoned hundreds of floating vow sigils, each a promise broken or forgotten. They rained down like blades. Kale deflected some, but others cut through aura and straight into the soul. He fell to one knee. Memories surged, His team, lost in the first dungeon. His brother, Drake Arclight, walking away into darkness. Lyra dying in a vision. So much failure. You can't carry this, the Oathborn whispered. Let it end. But Kale looked up. No. He stood. I'll carry all of it. The regrets, the failures, the broken pieces. Because that's what makes us human. He unleashed his new skill. Ashen Severance. A strike that severs emotional bindings. Effective only against aura constructs or corrupted oath-bound entities. He slashed, and the chains binding the Oathborn snapped. Oathborn's end and gift. She collapsed, not dead but released. The mask cracked and fell away, revealing tear-stained cheeks. Her lips mouthed something. Thank you. The dome around the shrine shattered. The illusion dissolved. Rain returned. Reality settled. In her place, a new relic hovered. Name, Oathcore Fragment. Type, Domain Key. Effect, unlocks sealed pathways left behind by ancient vow-bearers. Grants access to a secret eternal vault beneath Zenith's reach. Kale took it silently. We're getting closer, Zera whispered. One more seal, and we'll reach the heart. Drake exhaled. About damn time. I'm ready to punch an Eternal in the face. Lyra just looked at Kale. You okay? He nodded, slowly, but in his heart, the echoes of promises still rang. Orenia, northernmost peaks. The cold at Zenith's reach didn't bite. It cut. Wind howled through the towering ridges, carving sharp echoes into the mountain spine. Every breath was frost. Every step a battle against gravity. Kale stood near the edge of a cliff, the wind tearing at his coat. Below them sprawled an impossible bridge of ancient aura crystal, stretching toward a citadel that clung to the summit like a forgotten crown. Drake growled, You sure this isn't some frozen death trap? Zera smiled thinly. It is, but it's our death trap now. Lyra held her hands close to her chest, golden aura flickering like a hearth. How many Eternals sealed here? 2, Zera said. One bound by logic, the other by faith. Crossing the crystal path. As they set foot on the bridge, it responded, glowing faintly under their steps. Each of them felt something watching. Kale's eyes darted to the edge. A figure stood at the far end. No aura, no movement, just watching. Hostile? Drake asked. No, Kale muttered. Not yet. The path fractured beneath them. From the skies, winged constructs descended, living obsidian, burning with divine runes. Guardians of the Seal, sky-clad sentinels, Zera said grimly. The faith-bound Eternals wardens. Good, Drake grinned. Been a while since I flew. He launched forward. Combat. High-altitude showdown. Drake activated Infernal Sky Climb, a propulsion technique that let him leap mid-air using bursts of beast flame. His fists collided with a sentinel, the explosion lighting up the sky. Lyra took position near Kale, her solar rings shielding them from falling projectiles. She launched healing pulses to boost Drake's stamina while Kale prepared his offensive. Kale whispered, Ashen Veil. He vanished in a ripple of gray smoke, appearing mid-air, directly above a sentinel. His blade hummed with soul scorch. A clean vertical slash split the construct in half. Zera, meanwhile, simply vanished. A second later, 6 sentinels fell, screaming, suffocated by shadow. Arrival at the Citadel gates. Panting, bruised, but unbroken, the team reached the gates of the Zenith Citadel. The aura here pulsed slower, heavier. Kale touched the Oathcore fragment. It resonated. The doors opened. Inside, the walls told stories, etched visions of gods and mortals, of lost faith and sacrifices that led nowhere. At the center stood a being of silver light, calm, symmetrical, and terrifying. You've come far, but you still do not understand. To defy the Eternals is to defy the order of memory. Faith-bound Eternal, Karen, the Vow Architect. Unlike the Oathborn, Karen did not scream. He declared. With a gesture, reality folded. The Citadel's hall vanished, replaced by a battlefield in the sky. Endless clouds beneath, stars above. No floor, no ceiling. Kale felt the pressure instantly. It's a logic trap, he hissed. Every movement is measured. Every choice weighed. Karen raised a hand. A glyph of immense complexity appeared, rotating with divine calculus. You carry the Ashen mark. That alone is contradiction. You will be corrected. Fusion activated, domains sync. Kale linked with Lyra, Drake, and Zera in full sync, combining aspects of their aura. Lyra's lumen grace, mixed with Kale's ashen veil, created solar ash reversal, a burst barrier that healed allies and burned through aura illusions. Drake's flame maelstrom merged with Kale's burnout dash to form Helltrail Surge, a flaming shadow step technique that broke aura wards. Zera synced her cursed echo threads with Kale's soul scorch to form Wraith Rend, a blade extension that ignored conventional defense. Karen's logic spiral. Karen responded by initiating a vow circuit. Every attack was calculated and countered before it landed. Kale slashed, only to find the blade looped back at himself. Lyra cast a barrier, instantly inverted. Drake's flames vanished in his silence. Even Zera looked rattled. He's rewriting cause and effect live. Kale gritted his teeth. Then let's break the rules. Ashen transcendence. Instinct override. Kale closed his eyes. In silence, he let go. Not of control, but of prediction. He moved purely on instinct, pure reaction, driven by trust in the bond with his allies. Each step was impossible, yet each blow landed. His blade cracked the logic spiral. Zera darted in behind him, cursed mist blooming, masking his path. Drake rammed Karen with infernal fawn drive. Lyra cast Dawncore Halo, a pulse that shattered aura equations. Karen faltered. This is not balance. This is chaos. Kale screamed, aura flaring. And oh, this is choice. He activated Ashen Severance, absolute break. A sword strike that didn't hit Karen's body. It struck his conviction. Karen's fall. Final words. The Eternal's body crumbled, dissolving into silver dust. Kale stood there, panting. Even the gods can fall. Karen's voice whispered one last time. Then go forward. But the last gate will not welcome you. She waits. A golden key appeared, its handle shaped like a broken crown. Relic acquired, Crown of Paradox. Effect. Grants access to the final gate, the Throne of Dust. Outside the citadel, campfire silence. Later that night, beneath starlight and snow, the four of them rested. No words, just breathing. Drake stared at the flames. One more, just one eternal left. Lyra nodded, and then Zera glanced at Kale. He'll have to choose what remains. Kale didn't respond. He stared at the broken key in his hands and wondered what waited behind the last door. Wastes of Noctheron, the final descent. It was as if the world had forgotten this place. Noctheron wasn't just a marsh, it was a grave. Of kingdoms, of memories of time itself. Kale stepped across land that crackled beneath his boots, where trees rose like skeletal hands clawing at the mist-choked sky. Behind him, the others followed in silence. The Crown of Paradox, Kale's final relic, glowed faint gold, suspended above his open palm. Each pulse from it didn't just light the way, it warped it. Space twisted, logic bent. Rocks floated. The fog trembled as if afraid. This place is worse than the Dusker wastes, Drake muttered, his gauntlets flaring slightly with nervous fire. No, Zera said, her voice quiet but sharp. This place is true. That's why it's dangerous. Lyra's light aura flickered against the fog, struggling to keep the dark at bay. Feels like even aura is dying here. Kale didn't respond. He could feel it, a pull. Not physical, not magical, but resonant. Something calling to the core of his being. To the Ashen. The final eternal was near. The gate of the forgotten sovereign. It appeared without warning. A throne carved of glass, bone, and twisted roots sat beneath a dead tree that stretched across the stars themselves. It wasn't planted into the ground. It was the ground, its bark fusing with the very space around it. At its base was a door. A single symbol burned across it. Familiar, ancient, and undeniably his. Only one may enter. Kale stepped forward. Drake grabbed his shoulder. You're not going in there alone. Cale glanced at his friend. I have to, he said. It's waiting for me. Zara's eyes narrowed. This isn't a gate. It's a mirror. Cale looked back at all of them, his allies, his anchor. If I don't come back. Shut up. Drake interrupted, fire cracking through his grin. You will, 'cause I'm not dragging your mopey ghost around. Lyra offered a small nod, her lights steadying. Zara just watched. Cale breathed in once, felt the ashen stir in his blood, and stepped through. Inside the throne of dust, the world collapsed. There was no sky, no ground. Only fragments of memory swirling like ash in the dark. At the center sat a figure, on a throne made of broken promises and fading stars. She looked human. White robes, silver hair like drifting embers, black eyes that didn't shine, didn't reflect. Mother, Cale whispered, though he knew the answer. She smiled faintly. I'm not her. I am Veyne, the last oath, eternal not by faith or logic, but by grief. Cale stepped forward, hand on his blade. Then let's finish this. You don't want to fight me, Cale, she said softly. Why? Because if you win, you become me. Final trial, the dust within. She raised a hand, and reality broke. Cale screamed, but no sound came. Only memories. He was a boy again, kneeling in front of a burning house. His parents gone, his brother leaving. Alone. He was a soldier, watching comrades fall while he stood, useless. He was a killer, blade buried in someone who begged him not to. He was Drake, laughing to hide pain. He was Lyra, healing others but unable to save herself. He was Zara, always watching, never belonging. The ashen aura inside him cracked, flickered, dimmed, but did not break. Cale clenched his fists and roared. Ashen pulse, will flare. A flash of silver flame erupted from his body, shattering the illusion around him. You think I don't carry this already? He shouted. I do, but I still walk forward. I won't become you. Veyne smiled and wept. The final battle, crownless divinity. She rose from her throne, her aura unspooled, no longer bound by form. It flowed like dusk, like sorrow made real. Cale activated Ashen Domain, fracture-bound. The world twisted, space tearing. They stood in a realm where instinct ruled, where time was suggestion and aura was law. Their blades met. One strike, another, clash, counter, break. Veyne moved like wind and regret. Every blow was a memory trying to return. Cale answered with certainty. His blade wasn't fast, it was final. She unleashed memory reclaim, reversing time around her. But Cale had already adapted, leaving after images that disrupted the cycle. You learn fast, she murmured. I don't have time to die, he replied. Ashen awakening, absolute self. The ashen core within Cale didn't evolve. It stilled, no longer shifting, no longer adapting. It had reached its final form. Not something new, but something true. Cale didn't become stronger or faster. He became right. Each move was precise, each strike inevitable. And when he stood before her, blade to heart, he wasn't trembling. She looked up at him calm, almost relieved. You passed. Cale's hand tightened. Then why aren't you fighting back? Because you didn't kill me to win. You killed me to end it. Ascension of the Ashen One. Her body turned to dust. Not lifeless, but released. The throne cracked, then shattered. And Cale heard a voice. Not hers. Not the world's. But his own. I'm not a god. I am not an eternal. I am Cale Arclight. And I choose what comes next. Outside the gate. The throne exploded behind him, turning into streaks of fading light. Cale stepped out. His figure looked the same, but his aura was still, grounded, whole. Drake blinked. You look like you aged 10 years. Lyra didn't speak. She just hugged him. Zara watched him with a gaze softer than before. It's done, she said. Cale looked up at the skies. Still cracked, but no longer weeping. Orenia, Sol Maris ruins, 3 days after the fall. Smoke no longer curled in the sky, but the scars remained. Cale stood atop the jagged remnants of what was once Sol Maris's high citadel. Wind tugged at the edges of his cloak, carrying the bitter scent of ash and scorched stone. Below him, the city sprawled, fractured, smoldering but breathing. Buildings lay in ruin, spires cracked and leaning, but life stirred in the broken streets. Survivors moved like ghosts, unsure whether to mourn or rebuild. The skies were no longer etched with eternal runes. The stars had returned. They just didn't shine the same. He hadn't spoken since they left Noctheron. Not a word, not even a grunt of pain. Silence clung to him like a second skin. His blade, ashen flame, now dormant, hung at his back. The once living fire that danced along its edge had dimmed to a lifeless charcoal shimmer. At his chest, the crownless core pulsed once like a second heartbeat, but instead of raw power, it offered silence. Not peace, not purpose, just silence, as if waiting for him to define what came next. Lyra approached first, limping slightly from the last encounter. Her sun veil feather glimmered faintly, reacting to the dawn light that crept through the cracks in the skyline. There was blood still dried on her robes. Her hands trembled from overuse of her healing art, but her gaze was steady. "We should report to the Vanguard Council," she said softly. Even her voice felt like it didn't belong here, too bright for the ruins. Cale didn't look at her. "What council?" She hesitated, then replied. "Vale Solane is still holding Lyriel's divide. A few wardens regrouped. They're waiting for your word." "My word," Cale muttered almost bitterly, as if I know what it means anymore. He looked toward the horizon, where flickers of distortion hung like torn silk across the sky. The edges of reality had frayed. The veil between realms no longer held firm. The world hadn't reset. Not really. It had been freed, and now it didn't know what to do with that freedom. The system ripple. Ashen resonance. Complete. World shift status. Stabilizing. New titles unlocked. Ashen architect. You are no longer bound to the cycle. Remainder. Echoes of the old world still linger. Will you burn them? Decision tree. 3 paths. 1. Throne of order. Establish a new system. 2. Shadow of self. Erase all remnants. 3. Flamewalker. Guide but never control. Cale read the choices. Each line glowed in the air, before him like threads waiting to be pulled. He dismissed the prompt. He wasn't ready to choose. Not yet. Ember Deep. Drake Nor. "I'm telling you, they're coming," Drake growled. He slammed his gauntlet fist into the obsidian war table. Crimson sparks flew from the infernal gauntlets, scorching the ancient maps strewn across the surface. Around him, the command chamber of Ember Deep pulsed with heat, lava rivers running just beneath glass floors, casting red light across the tense faces of his lieutenants. The Wormkin Accord had grown fast. Too fast. What began as a tribe of Beastora survivors had become something zealous. They worship Cale, one of the Beastora commanders said. They say he's the final evolution, the one who devoured divinity, the tyrant of ash. Drake scowled. "He's my friend, not your messiah." But they didn't listen. Not really. He looked toward the molten horizon. Something stirred in the deep places of Emberdeep. Ancient roots. Old hunger. Even Cale's shadow had weight now. Lyriel's divide. Vyl Solane. She survived. Vale stood among the fractured crystalline spires of the divide. Her armor, once radiant and ceremonial, now bore deep claw marks, the sigil of Sunspire tarnished by blood and time. Around her, banners were torn, the ground littered with shards of relics too damaged to repair. Few wardens still stood beside her, the remnants of an age that no longer existed. A courier knelt before her, trembling. Zara Valeth requests an audience. She's unlocked the Arkvale Temple. Alone. Vale narrowed her eyes. Then we're already too late. Arkvale Temple, Zara Valeth. The bells didn't ring anymore. Zara walked barefoot through the forgotten corridors of Arkvale, her presence accompanied only by the whisper of her cursed mist. The air was dense, thick with memory. Her wraith bell had cracked after the final chime, an echo so powerful it tore open more than one truth. She no longer needed it. The temple wasn't built to worship. It was built to remember. In the deepest chamber, she found it, a mirror of sorts, not of glass, but of raw memory, formed from frozen aura. It pulsed with recollection, flickering between timelines, faces, and voices. Inside, she saw a boy, Kale, bloodied from his first dungeon. He looked at the stars like they owed him an answer. Zara placed her hand on the surface. You broke it. You broke everything. But someone will try to fix it, and that's always worse. The mirror pulsed. Once, the fissures opened. All across Arena, the ground trembled. Where Eternals once ruled, new anomalies tore open. Fissures, twisted, semi-sentient rifts of aura where time folded and reality screamed. In Zenith's reach, an entire mountain collapsed, upward, breaking into sky fragments as gravity reversed. Villages dissolved into the air, time looping endlessly in floating debris. In the dusker wastes, malformed creatures slithered from the earth, shadows wearing faces they should not remember. Dungeon lords who had died returned with voices not their own. But the worst was in Sol Maris, because Kale saw it happen. A tear split open beneath the central square, tendrils of dark aura snapping and unraveling as space buckled. Citizens screamed, fleeing as the fissure birthed light and shadow. And inside it, Kale saw himself, not a reflection, another him. Same face, same blade, but eyes devoid of choice. Ashen tyrant. The other Kale smiled and stepped forward. Arena, Sol Maris ruins, the echo of a new dawn. The world felt alive in ways it had never been before. It had been 3 days since the fall, and yet the air still hummed with a strange energy, an energy not born of the Eternals or the system, but of something raw and untainted. The ashes of the past scattered in the winds, and Kale felt that they were not the only things caught in its current. He had been silent ever since they arrived at the ruins of Sol Maris, his thoughts clouded, drifting. Around him, the city, his city, was a reflection of the world he had once known, fractured, broken, but struggling to breathe, to grow. The remnants of the high citadel stood tall, but they had been scorched, worn down by battles fought long before Kale had been born. The sky was clear, but the land was scarred, veins of blackened earth where once vibrant fields had sprawled. Kale stood at the top of the jagged tower, the view stretching far beyond the city's horizon. The remnants of Sol Maris sprawled below him, lifeless yet full of potential. His eyes traced the outline of the city's former grandeur, now slowly being overtaken by the slowly returning forces of nature. There were no longer runes in the sky, no barriers of divine while keeping the world locked in its unnatural cycle. The stars had returned, but they no longer gleamed with the same authority. They were distant, free, but utterly different from before. A faint pulse came from the crownless core at his chest, like the beat of a heart, or a question he wasn't ready to answer. Beside him, Lyra lingered, her light aura flickering faintly as she struggled to keep her balance on a limb that had been wounded in the final battle. Her gaze rested on the broken city below them. "We should report to the Vanguard Council," she said, her voice strained but firm. Kale didn't respond immediately. His hand rested on the hilt of ashen flame, but the blade remained dormant, silent, just like its wielder. "What council?" he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "The Vanguard is gone. Its roots were torn out, burned away with everything else." Lyra shook her head, though there was no bitterness in her expression. "Not all of it. Vale Solane's still holding Lyriel's divide. Some of the wardens remain loyal. They're waiting for your word." His fingers tightened around the hilt of his blade. It was strange to hear Lyra speak of the Vanguard, as though it still held meaning. In truth, nothing felt anchored anymore. Nothing made sense. But they couldn't linger in the past. The war was over, but the world wasn't yet at peace. Kale's gaze swept across the ruined expanse of Sol Maris, eyes narrowing slightly as something caught his attention. Distortions flickered across the sky, like remnants of shattered glass, remnants of the old world, taunting the present. These distortions pulsed weakly, chaotic and unnerving. "It hasn't reset," he muttered. The world wasn't reborn. It was freed, and now it doesn't know what to do with itself. The system rippled, Ashen resonance, complete. World shift status, stabilizing. New titles unlocked. Ashen architect, you are no longer bound to the cycle. Remainder, echoes of the old world still linger. Will you burn them? Decision tree, 3 paths. 1. Throne of order, establish a new system. 2. Shadow of self, erase all remnants. 3. Flamewalker, guide but never control. The prompt came to Kale, but he didn't act on it. He stared at the decision tree for what felt like an eternity. He could hear the faint crackle of energy around him, as if the world itself was waiting for him to act. But Kale knew the weight of the choices before him. Each path would leave its mark, carving a future that could not be undone. He'd already lived 1,000 lives, each one an echo, each one a fracture of who he was. Not yet. The crownless core pulsed once more, but this time it wasn't an invitation, it was a reminder. A choice was coming. But for now, Kale closed the prompt, allowing the silence to settle back over him. Ember deep, the Wormkin Accord. Far from the ruins of Sol Maris, the heart of Ember Deep burned. Drake Norse stood in the inner sanctum of the Wormkin Accord, his gauntlets flaring with unrestrained fire. The air crackled with the heat of lava rivers flowing through the chambers, crimson runes casting eerie shadows against the walls. The dark, molten depths felt suffocating, but to Drake they were home. He slammed his fist into the obsidian table before him, his anger so raw it practically burned the air around him. The infernal gauntlets sparked, the flames in them twisting with his fury. "They're coming," he growled. "The fanatics, the ones who think Kale's some kind of god. This is going too far." A grizzled Wormkin commander stood by the table, his gaze unblinking as he listened. "They say Kale devoured divinity, that he is the final evolution of the Ashen." Drake's eyes blazed with fire. "Kale's my friend, not some damn messiah for you to twist around to fit your petty ideology." The room fell into a heavy silence. "Doesn't matter what you think," the commander responded flatly. "They believe in him, and they will follow." Drake let out a growl of frustration, turning away from the table. "They can believe whatever they want, but they're going to have to deal with me first." Lyriel's Divide, Vyl Solane. Far to the north, within the fractured spires of Lyriel's Divide, Vyl Solane watched as the sun set, casting shadows that twisted like broken specters across the land. Her once shining armor was dull now, worn by battle, by time. Deep claw marks, remnants of ancient struggles, marred the surface. The courier bowed before her, his breath ragged with urgency. "Zara Valeth requests an audience." "She's unlocked the Arkvale Temple." "Alone." Vale's expression darkened. She rose, her eyes narrowing. "Then we're already too late." Arkvale Temple, Zara Valeth. Inside the ancient Arkvale Temple, Zara moved with quiet purpose. The once grand bells of the temple had fallen silent, their chimes now mere echoes in the deep chambers. Her cursed mist trailed behind her like smoke, curling around every corner, every ruin. Her wraith bell had cracked, and though the damage seemed trivial, its final chime had unlocked something far more profound. A vision, a glimpse of the future to come. Not what Kale would choose, but what it meant to have the choice at all. Zara stood before the mirror at the heart of the temple. It was not glass, but memory, a reflection of the past and future, all bound together. In its depths, she saw a boy, his face bloodied, his eyes haunted by the weight of things lost, staring up at the stars. Zara touched the mirror, the cool surface sending a chill through her. She whispered to herself, her voice a quiet thread in the temple's silence. "It's not over. You broke it. Now someone will try to fix it. And that's always worse." The fissures opened. Across Arena, the ground trembled as new anomalies tore open. Fissures. They were more than just cracks in reality. They were sentient, warping the space around them as if trying to find a way to pull the world back into the cycle it had just escaped. From one in Zenith's reach, a mountain collapsed into the sky, swallowed by the rift. From another in the Dusker wastes, creatures, shadows of long-dead dungeon lords, emerged, wearing faces they should not have remembered. But the most terrifying thing was the fissure in Sol Maris. Kale saw it unfold before him. A tear opened beneath the ruins of the city, a rift so deep that it seemed to go beyond time itself. And inside that tear was Kale, another version of him, a second Kale. He couldn't explain it. He didn't have words, but he could feel it. That second version of himself stared back, silent, waiting. And in that gaze, Kale saw the first choice, the one he couldn't escape. Would the world change again? Would he be the one to burn it all, or the one to guide it to something new? He wasn't sure, but it would begin here, and he would be ready. Sol Maris ruins, the edge of decision. The echo of the fissure lingered in the air, even as the ground settled. Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something far more profound had shifted, something that no one could have predicted, not even himself. His gaze remained locked on the rift beneath the city, still wide open, pulsing with strange, forbidden energy. A second Kale stood within it, but it wasn't a mere reflection. It was something else entirely. Kale! Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. She stepped closer, her sun veil feather gleaming faintly against the backdrop of the shattered city. The light in her aura was dim, yet there was a quiet strength in the way she moved, unbowed despite the toll the battles had taken on her body. He didn't respond at first. His eyes still traced the distorted edges of the fissure, where the very fabric of reality had torn open. It was like staring at the abyss and seeing pieces of his past, his future, and every choice in between. "You're not alone in this," she continued, her voice steady. "We can face whatever comes together." Kale's gaze flickered briefly to her, but he didn't meet her eyes. This isn't about being together anymore. The world isn't the same. Lyra fell silent. Her words, once so full of hope and certainty, seemed hollow now, lost in the winds of a world that had forgotten its purpose. Kale's hand clenched around the hilt of Ashen Flame. The blade's power surged to life with a faint hum, as though it, too, felt the stirring of something greater in the air. The crownless core at his chest pulsed again, and the familiar resonance of the system's prompt appeared, hovering like a phantom before him. "Ashen Architect, you have seen the choices. The first has been made. New path, Flamewalker, guide but never control." Kale exhaled slowly, the weight of the prompt pressing down on him. He couldn't help but wonder if the choice had already been made for him. The fissure was not just a tear in space. It was a manifestation of everything he'd been through, everything he was, everything he could be. A path ahead, one he hadn't asked for, but one that called to him nonetheless. "You can't control what's happening anymore," Kale muttered to himself, though the words were meant for more than just his own ears. "Not the people, not the world, not even the fissures. But I can guide them. I can help them choose." Ember Deep, the Wormkin Accord. In the heart of Ember Deep, Drake Nor was still grappling with the chaos unfolding across Aurenia. The Wormkin Accord, once a loosely organized alliance of B-story users, had turned into something far more dangerous, a growing, feverish faction that worshipped Kale as some kind of divine being. The fervor of the Wormkin was unsettling. They saw Kale not as a friend or a leader, but as an ideal, a myth. But Drake knew better. "Drake, we got a problem," one of the commanders said, stepping into the war room, his face drawn tight with concern. "The Accord is growing too fast. They're getting more radical every day." Drake's hand tightened around his gauntlet. "What do you mean?" "They're starting to demand sacrifices. They believe Kale is their salvation, their final evolution. They think he's the one who can transcend the system itself." Drake's brow furrowed, his thoughts darkening. This isn't Kale's vision. He doesn't want to be worshipped. He never did. The commander nodded. "I know, but the Wormkin aren't listening to reason anymore. And with the fissures opening, the power's slipping from our hands. If we can't control them now, they'll tear the whole world apart." Drake stood, his gaze hardening. "Then we stop them, before they do something we can't undo." Lyriel's Divide, Vyl Solane. Vale Solane stood atop the shattered cliff, the weight of her thoughts heavier than the broken land beneath her feet. The world had changed, and not for the better. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the distant, roiling horizon, where the sky seemed to crack open at the seams. Her armor, dull and battered from the countless battles, still clung to her form. The claw marks from the ancient beast that had nearly claimed her life had not yet healed, their jagged edges a reminder of what she'd survived. Zara Valeth, the enigmatic figure she had once called ally, had made her move. The courier's words echoed in Vale's mind. Zara had unlocked the Arkvale Temple. Alone, Vale turned to face the courier, a deep unease settling within her chest. Is she truly alone? The courier nodded, his eyes wide with worry. She says it's necessary. Vale's eyes grew cold. Then we're already too late. Arkvale Temple, Zara Valeth. Inside the Arkvale Temple, Zara moved with purpose, her every step echoing in the empty, hallowed halls. The once vibrant chimes of the bells had long since faded, their sound silenced by the corruption that had seeped into the temple's very bones. Her cursed mist hung heavy around her like a veil, undisturbed by the stillness that surrounded her. The wraith bell she carried was cracked, its resonating power flickering and dimming with every passing moment. But even in its broken state, the bell had shown her the truth. Kale's choice was not yet made. The world hung in the balance, and she knew that whichever path Kale chose would alter the course of history. She stood before the ancient mirror within the temple, the surface shimmering with an ethereal light. This was no ordinary mirror, but a portal to the past and future, a window into the memory of everything that had come before. In the reflection, she saw Kale, a boy, his face bloodied, his eyes distant, staring up at the stars as though they owed him an answer. He was the same boy she had once seen, the one who had fought, bled, and grown stronger with every trial. But the mirror showed more than just Kale's past. It showed the weight of the choice he now carried. Would he be the one to shape the future, or would he be swallowed by it? Zara touched the mirror, feeling the cold surface beneath her fingers. She whispered softly, her voice carrying through the still air. It's not over. You broke it. Now someone will try to fix it. And that's always worse. The fissures open, the final choice. As Kale stood at the heart of Solmaris, gazing into the gaping fissure that now lay beneath the city, a chill washed over him. The rift seemed to pulse with an energy that defied all logic, bending the very fabric of reality. Inside the tear, Kale saw himself. A second Kale, one who did not speak, did not move, but only stared back with cold, knowing eyes. He felt no fear, no hesitation, only the certainty that something was waiting. Kale's hand clenched around Ashenflame's hilt once again, and the blade hummed to life in response. It felt different now, as if it, too, understood that the choice had to be made. The decision weighed on him heavily. Not yet. He wasn't ready, but he knew that soon he would have to choose. To guide, to burn, or to become something greater than himself. Solmaris, beneath the city, Kale descended into the heart of the fissure. Stone cracked beneath his feet, the air warping around him like breath held too long. The closer he moved toward the rift, the more it bled not just light or shadow, but memory. Each step carried echoes. Lyra's laughter, Drake's rage, Zara's warnings. His brother's betrayal. And above all, the whisper of the system unraveling. The second Kale stood motionless at the center. He wasn't a reflection. He was real, identical in face and form, but his ashen flame was jagged, darker. His eyes, hollow like all the light had been burned out of them. "Who are you?" Kale asked, his voice echoing against the walls of the rift. The figure finally moved, a single step forward. When he spoke, the voice was his but deeper, older. "I'm what you become if you stop choosing." Kale's breath caught. "I'm the version of you who embraced the crownless core without restraint. The one who said yes to every evolution, every instinct, every flame." Kale's grip on his blade tightened. "Then why are you here now? To finish what you started, or remind you what you're becoming." The doppelganger raised his blade, and the fissure flared, memories lashing out like tendrils, slicing through Kale's mind. He saw it all. cities burning under his hand. The Wormkin following him like zealots. Zera, broken. Drake dead. Lyra, sacrificed. And Kale himself, crowned in ash, no longer a guide, but a god. No, Kale whispered, staggering back. That's not who I am. The doppelganger surged forward. Blades clashed, ashen flame against its darker twin. The impact echoed through the fissure like thunder. The battle wasn't just physical. With every strike, Kale felt memories being pulled from him, drained, moments of doubt, of kindness, of mercy. The other Kale fought with the conviction of one who had stopped doubting. You hesitate. That's why you'll lose, the dark Kale hissed. You want to lead without control. You think you can change the world without owning it. I don't want to own it, Kale shouted, flames coiling around his blade. I just don't want anyone to suffer like I did. For the first time, the doppelganger faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. Kale drove his blade forward, an upward arc igniting into ashen soul flare. The strike burned not just through the enemy's weapon, but through the memory tethered to it. Through that possible future. The figure collapsed, blade shattering to dust, whispering as he faded. You'll see. One day, they'll make you choose again. Kale stood alone once more in the heart of the fissure. Breathing hard, vision blurring, but the tear was closing. He'd passed the test, not with absolute power, but by choosing not to become everything he could. Lyriel's divide, Zera Valeth. Zera shivered as the temple's mirror shattered into silver ash. He chose, she whispered, curling her fingers around the fractured wraith bell. Flame Walker. The air shifted behind her. A shadow stepped from the wall, hooded, faceless. One of the unseen observers. The remnants. Now the others will awaken, the voice said, like wind scraping stone. The architect will not stand idly. Zera's eyes narrowed. Neither will we. Ember Deep, Drake. They're turning on each other, one of the Wormkin scouts said, panting. Drake stood at the edge of the molten terrace, watching the camp below fracture into riots and chants. Some still prayed to Kale. Others rejected him. We can't let them become another eternal cult, Drake muttered. Kale wouldn't want that. What do we do? The scout asked. He slammed a gauntlet to his chest. We remind them he's a man, not a god. Solmaris, surface. Lyra waited by the edge of the ruined city as the ground ceased its rumbling. A pulse of white fire surged from the fissure, and Kale emerged, scarred, soot-covered, but whole. Her eyes met his and something eased. You made it back, she said. Kale nodded, eyes heavy with something she couldn't quite name. It wasn't just a fight. It was a warning. From what? From me, he said quietly. Or what I could have been. She reached out, touched his arm. Then let's make sure you never become him. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since the battle with the Eternal, he nodded. Alarith Peaks, Nightfall Sanctum. The snow fell in slow spirals, silent and soft, as if mourning something long dead. But beneath the stillness, the mountain screamed. Within a hollowed cavern lit by bone fire and ancient sigils, a circle of cloaked figures chanted in a forgotten tongue. Their voices rose and fell like the heartbeat of the peaks themselves, feeding a growing pulse of aura that writhed in the air, an unnatural fusion of spectral and divine energies. A silver-masked priest stood at the center. His robes bore the mark of the old Eternals, now twisted into a sigil of mourning. We gather here, he said, not in vengeance, but in remembrance. A soft light bled from the glyphs behind him. A frozen statue stood upright, one of the fallen Eternals, preserved in final agony. This world has lost its rhythm. Its flame flickers without a source, but the cycle will return. It must. The priest turned, lifting a staff carved from fused relic bone. For that, the false flame must be extinguished. He didn't name Kale. He didn't have to. The Cradle of Silence had already declared their war. Solmaris, Vanguard Hall, what remains of it? The council chamber was barely a chamber anymore, just shattered stone, a makeshift table, and remnants of old glory. But people filled it again. Lyra sat at the head, bandaged and stern. Kale stood behind her, silent but present. Drake paced at the side, arms crossed, his flames dim but restless. Zara lingered in the corner, half shadow, half threat. Others had come too. Warden scouts from Lyriel's Divide, a surviving mystic from Dusker, even an emissary from Zenith's Reach, her skin pale as bone, her eyes a swirl of elemental aura. "We've confirmed 3 things," Lyra began. 1. Fissures are spreading. 5 have opened in the last week, and they're evolving. 2. The Wormkin Accord is unstable. Half their ranks have broken off into what they're calling the Scaled Flame, demanding Kale establish a new order. And 3, she hesitated. Zara spoke next. The Cradle of Silence has resurfaced. A cold silence fell over the hall. "I thought they were eradicated," the Zenith emissary said. "A fringe cult from the Abyssal Wars." "They never died," Zara replied. "They just waited for a world without gods." Drake slammed his gauntlet onto the table. "Let them come. I'm tired of ghosts." But Kale raised a hand. "They're not ghosts." Everyone turned. "They're believers," he said quietly. "And those are always the most dangerous." Lyriel's Divide, outer walls. Night fell, and with it came the first attack. Not armies, not beasts. Whispers. Wardens on patrol heard their names called from the trees. One screamed himself into madness, convinced his wife, long dead, was calling him home. Another vanished entirely, leaving behind only his relic, shattered into dust. Vale Solane stood atop the ramparts, blade drawn, her eyes glowing faintly with layered aura. "They're testing our minds before our walls," she muttered. Beside her, a warden seer held up a glyph stone, trembling. This is cradle magic. Distorted memory. Anti-resonance." "Then sharpen your thoughts," Vale said, narrowing her gaze. "Because they'll be trying to steal them next." Solmaris, Kale's dream. He stood in the old dungeon again. The first one. Only this time, he wasn't the one bleeding. It was Lyra, Drake, Zara, all cut down before him. And the system prompt returned, this time with no options. "You hesitated. This is your end," Kale screamed. Kale's chamber, moments later. He jolted awake, breath ragged, hand instinctively clutching ashen flame. A pulse from the crownless core steadied his nerves. But the dream lingered. A warning, a memory, a premonition? He wasn't sure anymore. The lines were blurring. He stood and walked to the open window. The wind howled past broken spires. Fires still dotted the city. He whispered aloud to no one. "What if I can't hold it all together?" Zara's voice came from the shadows behind him. "Then it breaks, and we try again." Zenith's Reach, sky vault ascent. High above the world, the architect's seal pulsed once. A flicker, a heartbeat. An eye, half-formed, opened, and watched. Ember deep, the crucible rift. Fire danced through obsidian canyons, casting long shadows across the molten rivers below. Ember deep had always burned, but now it burned differently. Drake Norse stood before the entrance of the crucible rift, his gauntlets glowing faintly as the heat warped the air. The Wormkin Accord had built their fortress here, a spire of molten stone and scale-etched steel jutting out of the volcano's heart. But not all of them were still loyal. Before him, banners had changed. Gone was the emblem of unity, replaced by a stylized flame wrapped around a serpent's skull. The Scaled Flame had declared themselves, and they were waiting for him. "Step aside, Bran," Drake said flatly. The Wormkin captain guarding the gate, once his sparring partner, once his friend, tightened his grip on his relic halberd. "You shouldn't be here, Drake. I'm not here to talk. You used to be our fire starter," Bran said bitterly. "Now you follow the Ashen One like a shadow." Drake's flames crackled to life around him. "That Ashen One saved your sorry hide more times than I can count." "Exactly," Bran replied, eyes sharp. "And that's the problem. You don't see it yet, do you? You're still playing hero. But we're preparing for survival." The gates opened behind him, and what emerged was something new. Warriors draped in flame-drenched scales, eyes glowing with beastera so dense it shimmered. They bore no rank, no class, only a belief. "The weak need rulers," one of them said, "and Kale refuses to be one. So we'll build the future he's too afraid to claim." Drake didn't flinch. He just stepped forward, aura flaring like a rising inferno. Then I'll burn your delusion to ash. Solmaris, Lyra's archive. Lyra sat cross-legged among shattered shelves and glowing scrolls, her fingers tracing old maps of Arena before the system. Even after everything, she remained the healer, the one searching for order in chaos. But today, her hands trembled, because the scroll she held was not from Arena. It was from beyond. Zara appeared beside her, silent as shadow. "You're looking at the Veyne fold," she said. "A fragment world. One of the failed echoes." Failed? Arena wasn't the first to bind aura to a system, Zara explained. Just the first to survive it this long. Lyra's breath caught. Kale opened the first fissure. "If there are more like this." "There are," Zara whispered. "And not all of them are empty." They looked at each other. Both understood. They weren't dealing with one world anymore. They were dealing with many. And not all wanted to remain forgotten. Solmaris, Kale's chamber. Kale watched the news unfold. The Scaled Flames manifesto had spread like wildfire. Everywhere his name was whispered, factions were drawing lines. Follow Kale, dethrone Kale, destroy Kale, or become him. He stared at the system prompt he'd ignored days ago. Decision tree. Path remains unchosen. World shift continues. He wanted to choose. He wanted peace. But every path felt like another chain. Lyra entered, holding the scroll from the fold. "You should see this." He read it, then closed his eyes. "We broke the world," he murmured. "Now it's breaking us back." Lyra touched his arm. "You're not alone." He didn't respond. Not because he doubted her, but because he wasn't sure that mattered anymore. Ember Deep. Crucible Rift later. Drake emerged from the rift, scorched, battered, but standing. The Scaled Flame had yielded, for now. He carried Bren's halberd, shattered at the core, and a message scrawled in flame-marked steel. "You have one chance, Ashen Flame. Let us, or we lead without you." He stared at the message, then looked up at the sky, where stars flickered, strange, unaligned, unfamiliar. The sky itself was changing, and somewhere above, something watched, something patient, something waiting. Solmaris, the fissure beneath. Kale stood at the edge of the tear. The city behind him murmured with new life. Factions gathering, stories spreading, decisions looming, but before him was silence. No wind, no light, only the void. The fissure beneath Solmaris hadn't closed. It pulsed now, slow and hungry, like the breath of something old and thinking. Lyra stood behind him, her aura shield dimmed. "You don't have to go alone." Kale didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the figure forming inside. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't an echo. It was him. The second Kale stepped from the shadows barefoot, armored in flickers of memory. His hair was the same. His eyes a perfect match. But where Kale carried weight, this one shimmered, unburdened, unbroken. "You open me," it said in his voice. "So let's talk." Inside the fissure, time unraveled the moment Kale crossed the threshold. He blinked, and suddenly he was standing in the old training field outside Sunspire. Then blinked again. Now he was back in the first dungeon, bleeding over his father's sword. The second Kale strolled through the memories like a curator in a broken museum. "You think this is about power," it said. "But it's not. It never was. What are you?" "I'm the Kale who chose differently. I took the throne of order." Kale narrowed his eyes. "That path was locked." "Not to me," the echo said. "You hesitated." "I didn't. I built the new system, bound the fractured lands, chose structure over chaos." The vision shifted. Kale saw cities floating, dungeons stabilized, aura wielders ranked and numbered like clockwork. "It worked," the second Kale said. "But it felt wrong." The image cracked. Blood on glass. Screams beneath a regulated sky. Aura users lobotomized for balance. "I gave them order," the second Kale whispered, "and they became machines." Kale's voice was quiet. "Why show me this?" "Because the world is about to break again," his echo said, stepping closer. "And it needs a decision. Not a hero. Lyriel's divide. Vyl Solane." Vale knelt in the wind atop the divide's tallest spire, her eyes fixed on the southern horizon. The sky above was splitting, not like a storm, not like a rift, but like a reflection breaking across a mirror. From behind her, a scout spoke. The Wormkin are moving. Zera's vanished. And the scaled flame, they've reached the marsh. She didn't move. It's all converging, just like the prophecy warned. What prophecy? She turned, and in her hand was a scroll written in twin ink, ash and blood. One Kale ends a world, she whispered. Another shapes it. The question is, which one do we have? Inside the fissure, Kale versus himself. The two Kales stood in a collapsing memory. No system, Kale said. No throne. No cycle. That's the path I chose. And you'll burn for it, the second Kale replied. They didn't need weapons. Aura flared. Ash met order. Kale's ashen flame twisted reality with each swing, adapting, evolving mid-blow. The second Kale fought with crystalline efficiency, his aura forming rigid constructs, blades, shields, spears of law. They clashed in mid-air, in slow time, in the moment between heartbeats. Every impact sent memories shattering. A mother's voice, Drake's laughter, Zera's betrayal, Lyra's tears. They fought over what those memories meant. Kale finally broke the stalemate, unleashing a skill he had never used before. Ashen art, soul-fracked, refused the mirror. His echo cracked, shivered, and screamed. Then choose, damn you, the second Kale roared. Let the world know what path you walk. I will, Kale said softly, stepping through the collapsing void. But not because you told me to. Solmaris, outside the fissure. Kale emerged, blood on his lip, ash curling from his fingers. Lyra caught him. What happened? Kale's eyes glowed, not with power, but with clarity. He looked at the sky. The stars were still wrong, but now he understood why. I saw what I could have been, he whispered, and I refused. The system ripple. Decision recognized. Path unlocked. Flamewalker. Guide the world without commanding it. Warning. Fissures are now attracted to you. Reward. Relic sink. Blade of the broken star. Lyriel's divide. Nightfall. The wind howled through the sundered peaks of the divide. Vale Solane stood atop the shattered wall of what had once been a Sunspire outpost. Her armor was no longer ceremonial. The crimson plates bore the scars of abyss beasts, eternal glyph burns, and something worse. Decisions she couldn't take back. Behind her, rows of tents fluttered, what was left of the vanguard. No more than 80 fighters. Half of them wounded, all of them watching her. Say it, one muttered. Say she abandoned us. She didn't, Vale snapped. She did what she had to do. A voice from the back. Then where is Zera now? Vale's silence was the answer. Sunvale tent, Lyra. Lyra moved through the medbay, pressing her hands to pulse after pulse. Light streamed from her fingertips, not radiant, but exhausted. Celestial aura cost more now, like the world itself demanded a toll for healing. She reached a young scout, barely 16, eyes fevered and focused. The Sunvale feather pulsed. Not a burst. A flicker. She barely held it together. Lyra. Kale's voice reached her like a cord strung tight. She turned, and for the first time since Noctheron, she saw his eyes clearly. The storm had passed, but something colder remained. They won't follow me, he said. Not all of them. She nodded. Then don't ask them to. Kale stepped forward, crouched beside the boy. Without a word, he laid a hand over the wound. Ash and light coiled together. The fever broke. He exhaled. This is what guiding looks like. Lyra gave him a tired smile. No, this is what you look like. Ember deep. Drake Nor. Flames spat up from the Wormkin forge. Drake had never stopped training. Not even now. The gauntlets around his arms, the infernal core, had started changing, responding not to rage, but to restraint. A new evolution. Where is he now? He asked one of his scouts. Solmaris. Rebuilding. Drake grunted. He always was the better one. That's not what they say. Drake turned. And what do you say? The scout hesitated. I say, maybe it's time we stop waiting for leaders to rise. Maybe it's time we chose who deserves to lead. Drake punched the air. A ring of fire split the stone wall in two. I already chose, he said. Now let's see if he still deserves it. Arkvale Temple, Zera. The cracked wraith bell sang. Just once. Zara knelt in the temple's core, her hands bleeding from drawing a circle in dust and bone. A fissure flickered before her, but it didn't open. It watched. She whispered into it. "You think Kale's the only one who changed?" The fissure pulsed, and inside it someone answered. Solmaris, Vanguard Assembly. Kale stood before the remnants. No speech, no fanfare, just presence. Some looked away. Some stared with fury. A few knelt, but most waited. He didn't promise a new order, didn't invoke the system. He simply said, "I'm walking forward, not above, not behind, just forward. You don't have to follow, but if you do, know that it's a path with no crown. Only choice." A silence passed. Then Vale stepped forward. She saluted. So did Lyra. Then 2 more. Then 5. Then 40. Until the Vanguard stood, not as a force of war, but as witnesses to what comes next. The system ripple. The first fissure. Location unknown. There was no sky, no ground. Only a veil of lightless mist, pulsing as if it breathed. Kale stepped through the threshold, boots brushing against nothing. The moment he crossed, the system went silent. No prompts, no ripples, only himself. Behind him, Lyra, Drake, Vale, and Zara followed, though even their presence felt muted here, as though the fissure rejected linear time. Zara's voice echoed beside him, though her lips didn't move. "This place predates the system. It's not a dungeon. It's a wound." "A wound?" Kale asked. "A memory," she corrected. "One the world buried. One we were never meant to find." They kept moving. Each step was a contradiction. Footsteps that made no sound. Air that felt like drowning. And yet, forward they walked. Hall of First Light. They emerged in a vast chamber carved from obsidian and flame glass. Floating relics spun in a slow orbit. Faded fragments of systems older than Arena. They weren't technology. They weren't relics. They were laws. Time fractured. Kale saw a dozen versions of himself. One still wearing his initiate robe. One dying in the Noctheron crypt. One who never survived the Ashen Awakening. One with golden eyes and no soul. They all looked back. Only one spoke. "You chose wrong." Kale didn't flinch. "Then I'll choose again." The copies blurred and dissolved. Only one door remained ahead, carved with a name. Orin. Vanguard Camp. Outside the fissure. Lyra collapsed. Her hands trembled as she poured aura into a sigil, trying to stabilize the entry point. Her wings, once radiant, now barely flickered. The fissure fought her efforts. Reality itself warped around it. Drake stood guard, his arms crossed. "They'll need a way out," Lyra muttered. "They won't need one if we can't hold this ground," he replied. The accords stirring. In the cradle, they've already begun chanting again. Zara's whisper came from the fissure's edge. "They want to revive Orin." But it was never alive. It was bound. A cycle given shape. Lyra met her gaze. "Then what's inside?" Zara's eyes darkened. The answer, or the end. The core chamber, Orin. Kale stepped into a throne room without walls. Stars spiraled above, but they weren't real. Just loops, echoes of endless resets. And at the center sat a figure, draped in robes of light and void, face flickering like a shattered mirror. Orin. It did not speak with voice. It spoke in finality. "You defied the cycle. You shattered the eternal plane. You seek freedom. You mistake it for salvation." Kale raised his blade, but it refused to ignite. Ashen flame was silent here. This was the birthplace of systems. The architect stood, a shape without edges, a will without mercy. "I am not your enemy. I am your consequence." The fight begins. It struck, not with aura, but with concept. Gravity bent. Memory splintered. Kale was a child again, clutching his brother's broken body. He was a corpse, his soul devoured by an eternal. He was a god, worshipped and hated. He screamed, and it echoed across realities. But he stood. He stood. Ashen relic fusion unlocked, crownless domain. You may reject divine influence. Area, purge initiated. Ashen light ignited, not from his blade but his core. Kale stepped forward, and the stars shivered. Cliffhanger. Orin loomed. Kale whispered, not to his allies, not to his enemies. but to the choice itself. If I must burn to end the cycle, then let me become the fire that cannot be caged. Within the crownless domain, the stars fell away. The moment Kale invoked the crownless domain, the concept of divinity cracked like thin ice beneath fire. What replaced it wasn't silence, it was truth. Raw, unfiltered existence, stripped of system, stripped of cycle. Orin reeled back. Its form, once formless and infinite, flickered. The throne beneath it shattered, not from force, but irrelevance. Kale stood at the heart of his own world now. No rules, no fate, only choice. Crownless domain, active, all divine system influence nullified in Aura's zone. You are the author. You are the end. He no longer needed ashen flame in hand. It hovered beside him, burning with a steady, quiet light. His aura, once wild and consuming, now pulsed with eerie stillness, adaptive, evolving without instruction. Kale wasn't just resisting the system anymore. He was rewriting it. Orin, the shattered architect. Orin's voice returned, but fractured, jagged. Error, error, timeline deviation, cycle corrupted, its limbs restructured. Where there were once endless possibilities, now only one remained: eradication. Orin unleashed a torrent of compressed time, a wave of past echoes, future failures, forgotten guilt. It was not an attack. It was punishment. Kale felt every version of himself scream in unison. The coward, the martyr, the tyrant, the one who gave up, the one who destroyed. They all surged toward him. Kale didn't block it. He accepted it. Every version, every path, absorbed into the ashen core. Not erased, not ignored, integrated, balanced. He stepped through the storm. You tried to make me a god, he whispered, but I'm just a man who chose to burn. And he moved. Outside the fissure, reality fractures. Lyra collapsed again. The fissure pulsed like a dying heart, casting shockwaves across the world. Cracks split the land. Dungeons collapsed. Cities twisted. Drake stood over her, bleeding from his side, holding the line against the cradle of silence. Acolytes, now screaming for Orin's return. They don't get it, he growled. You can't revive something that doesn't want to live. Vale fought beside him, her hair loose, armor broken, eyes blazing with pure force. If he fails, she said, cutting down a warped beast that emerged from side rupture, none of us are walking out. Zara's voice echoed through the glyph-linked mist. He's not trying to win, she said. He's trying to end it right. The final strike. Back within the crownless domain, Kale and Orin clashed. Not as combatants, but as ideals. Orin tried to restore control, slinging entire dimensions like blades, reweaving laws around Kale's body. Gravity collapsed. Space folded. Causality buckled. Kale didn't flinch. He absorbed. His aura bent with the force of endings. He forged a technique beyond skills, beyond relics. Ashen finality, flame of the never-bound. One strike, no flare, just a step forward and a blade of purpose. The moment it landed, Orin stopped moving. No death animation, no system announcement, just stillness, like a story being told one last time before the book closed. End of the architect. Orin looked at him, not as an enemy, but as its final creation. You did not destroy me. You let me die. Kale nodded. Everyone deserves that right, even the ones who forgot what it meant to be alive. Orin faded, and the world trembled. Closing, the choice remains. Kale stood alone in a void, now shaped by his own will. The system had no more hold, no more titles, no more fate. Only 3 paths remained. 1. Throne of Order, rebuild the system under his rule. 2. Shadow of Self, erase all traces, leave no cycle. 3. Flame Walker, guide from afar, never rule. He looked to the void, smiled, and whispered, I already chose. Sol Maris ruins, the aftermath. The land still trembled, not from the fight that had just ended, but from the aftermath of everything that had happened. Orin was no more, but its influence lingered in the cracks of reality. The fissures continued to pulse like open wounds across Arena, their unnatural energy warping time and space. Kale stood at the heart of Sol Maris, watching as the city began to rebuild itself. But it wasn't the city that consumed his thoughts. It was the weight of what he had just done. He had chosen. He had severed the cycle of the system. There was no going back. And yet, his choice fell heavier than any crown. The sky above him was a fractured canvas, an ever-changing color of pale light and shadow. It had once been controlled, predictable. Now it was chaos, just like everything else. Lyra approached him, her footsteps slow, weary. The healing wasn't just physical. She, too, was trying to heal from the chaos they had unleashed. She stood next to him, gazing at the horizon, where the last remnants of divine influence dissolved into the ether. "Is it enough?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cale didn't answer immediately. He watched as a flock of birds, strange, new creatures, flew across the sky. It was a symbol of freedom, but it felt empty. The birds flew without purpose, no path to follow, no system to bind them. "I don't know," he said finally, his voice heavy. "But it has to be." In the distant peaks, Drake and Veyne. In Ember Deep, Drake pounded his fists against the walls of his private chamber, his infernal gauntlets flaring with fury. His expression was a mixture of relief and disbelief. "They still don't understand," he growled, glaring at the map of Arena laid out before him. "We've torn everything apart, and now they're trying to put it back together like it was before." Vale, standing beside him, crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "You think they have a choice? The Cradle of Silence is calling it reconstruction, but that's just another cycle, one we were never meant to be part of. And what are we supposed to do now?" Drake snapped, frustration mounting. "Just let all burn." Vale's eyes softened for a moment, though her voice remained firm. "No, we'll let it all evolve. But we can't let the same mistakes happen again." The room fell silent for a long moment. The weight of their world, the shattered remnants of an old order, hung between them. The Wormkin Accord, a new call. At the heart of Zenith's reach, the Wormkin Accord had become an unexpected force. Their once fractured alliance had coalesced into a powerful faction, bound not by loyalty to the old system, but to the will of one man, Cale Arclight. Now, their leaders gathered in a massive hall carved from the living rock, surrounded by a ring of flame and ash. A voice echoed from the darkened chamber. "Is it time?" The voice asked, low and dangerous. "Is Cale truly the one to lead us? Or will we burn ourselves trying to follow?" A figure stepped forward from the shadows. Drake, his appearance grim but resolute. "He's not our leader. Not anymore," Drake said, his voice cold. "But he made us see something. We no longer need a king. We need a purpose." The crowd murmured in agreement, but not without doubt. The Wormkin had come to Cale because they thought he would be their salvation. Now, they wondered if they had become too lost in the wake of his choices. The Cradle of Silence, a new prophecy. Far from the chaos of the Wormkin's discontent, Zara Valeth stood in the heart of the Arkvale Temple, her gaze fixed upon the cracked and shattered wraith bell in her hands. The bell's chimes had not merely signaled the end of one world. They had announced the birth of something else entirely. She touched the edge of the bell, feeling the faint resonance left by its final toll. Her fingers trembled slightly. "It's not over," she muttered to herself, though she could feel the truth of it. Her eyes lifted, staring at the temple's shattered pillars, her gaze lingering on the horizon where the fissures continued to pulse. There was still more to be done, and she knew that whatever came next, the echoes of Cale's choices would never truly fade. "The architect is gone," she said softly. "But the story has only begun. The final echoes, a man alone." Cale's footsteps echoed through the remnants of Solmaris. He walked alone, no title, no crown. The sky above him was no longer the sky of the past, no longer controlled by divine will. It was now a canvas of infinite possibilities. The system was gone. The world was free. But what did that mean? What did freedom mean if there was no one left to guide it? Cale's thoughts were interrupted by a voice. Lyra's voice, steady but burdened. "Cale, you've changed everything. But you've also left everything in ruins. What now?" He turned toward her, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't have an answer. He had no grand speech. No plans. No next steps. But there was one thing he knew. One thing he could hold on to. I chose this, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I chose to let it burn. To let be free. She didn't say anything at first, just watching him. But then, she stepped forward, offering a faint, tired smile. Then what now? She asked. Cale looked at the horizon, the world's possibilities stretching out before him, uncharted and wild. His hand clenched into a fist. We rebuild, he said softly, but not the way they want, not the way they think we should. And with that, Cale turned and began to walk toward the unknown. Sol Maris ruins, the edge of a new dawn. The world had changed, and yet Cale felt no different. He walked through the remnants of Sol Maris, a city once pulsing with life, now a broken shell, slowly regrowing like the ashes of a phoenix. The ruins were not just the remnants of the physical world. They were the ashes of an old order. The old system had burned, its foundations shattered, leaving behind the raw, untamed possibilities of a new world. Cale stopped at the edge of what used to be the High Citadel. The tower had collapsed, but from its shattered remains, new life began to creep through, small sprouts of green, wildflowers pushing through the cracks, defying the desolation. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze distant, but there was a quiet strength in her posture. She hadn't fully recovered from the battle, but she was here, standing by his side. They'll call us gods, Lyra said quietly. Some already have. The Wormkin, the cradle of silence, they see you as the answer. The one who broke the cycle. They see what they want to see, Cale replied, his voice distant. What they need. But they won't understand that freedom doesn't come with a crown. It's not that simple. Lyra's eyes softened. But they need a leader, Cale. This world needs one. Someone to show them how to move forward. Cale's eyes flickered toward the horizon, where the fissures continued to writhe and pulse. Each one was a wound, a tear in the fabric of reality. But it was also a testament to the power he had unleashed. A testament to his choice. The choice to break the system. I don't want to lead them, Cale said softly, his voice firm but weary. But maybe I must. Or maybe I can show them that they don't need a leader at all. Maybe they need to learn how to lead themselves. The wind swept through the ruins, carrying with it the promise of change, and Cale closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what had come and what was yet to come. He could feel it in the air, the tension, the possibility, the unknown. He had chosen to burn away the past. Now, he had to walk the path of the Flame Walker. The Flame Walker's choice, the three paths. Cale's mind flickered back to the decision tree the Crownless Core had shown him. The three paths, the three choices, the throne, the shadow, the flame. He had burned away the throne, the idea of divine rule. He had burned away the shadow, the remnants of the past. Now, the flame was the only thing left. But the flame was not just destruction. It was creation. It was rebirth. It was freedom, and that was what terrified him. He had the power to reshape this world, to guide it, to burn away the broken parts and forge something new. But would that make him a tyrant? Would he be the flame that consumed everything? Or would he be the spark that ignited a new world? The echoes of the past still whispered to him, reminding him of the old ways, the system, the rules, the cycles. But Cale had chosen to let all of that burn. Now, the flame was his to wield. He would not allow it to consume him, but neither would he let it be extinguished. I won't be what they want me to be, Cale whispered to himself. I won't follow their expectations. I will be the flame that lights the path, not the one that destroys it. Ember Deep, Drake Nor's choice. In the depths of Ember Deep, Drake paced restlessly. The infernal gauntlets crackled with energy, responding to his turmoil. His loyalty to Cale had never wavered, but as the world shifted and changed, so too did his understanding of what it meant to follow. Burn it all down, Drake muttered to himself. That's what we've always done. That's what I've always done. But now? The Wormkin had rallied behind Cale, calling him a messiah, but Drake knew better. Cale was no god. He was a man just like him. A man who had chosen to walk the Flame Walker's path. But was that enough? Was that enough to lead the world? Drake's fingers clenched into fists, his gauntlets sparking with fury. The Wormkins saw power in Kale, but what if Kale didn't want to wield it? What if Kale just wanted to be free? He turned toward the rising flames of Ember Deep, the heat searing into his skin. It was then that he realized it wasn't about the power anymore. It wasn't about Kale. It was about the choice. The choice to burn or to heal. The choice to move forward or to remain in the ashes of the past. Lyriel's Divide, Vyl Solane. Far from the chaos, Vyl Solane stood at the edge of Lyriel's Divide, watching the horizon. The sky was different now, shattered and torn, but there was something beautiful in its brokenness. She had felt it, the shift in the world. She had seen Kale's actions, witnessed the aftermath, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Zara was right. Vyl said softly to herself, "The world doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be freed." But freedom came with a price. She had seen the fissures open, the distortions they caused. It was no longer about saving the world. It was about letting it choose its own path. Vale's fingers brushed the ancient stone of the divide. She could feel the power of the land beneath her, the pulse of the world itself. The old ways were gone. The world was now untethered, free to evolve on its own. But was it ready? She didn't know, but she was willing to find out. Arkvale Temple, Zara Valeth. In the ruins of Arkvale Temple, Zara Valeth stood alone, her hand resting on the cracked surface of the Wraith Bell. The final chime still rang in her ears, a sound that echoed through her very soul. The world had been changed. The old cycles had been broken. But what now? Zara closed her eyes, remembering the prophecy she had unlocked. A world reset, broken, and now free. Kale has done what needed to be done, Zara whispered, her voice trembling slightly. But now the question is, what will we do? The world stands at the crossroads. Kale stood at the precipice of the world, his hand outstretched toward the horizon, his mind racing with the weight of his choices. The fissures pulsed in the distance, the echoes of his decision still reverberating through the land. The sky above him was fractured, no longer the controlled canvas of the old world. It was a blank slate, ready to be shaped, but by whom? He turned to Lyra, his eyes meeting hers. "We can rebuild," he said softly, "but we must choose how. The world will find its path, whether we lead it or not." Lyra nodded, her expression somber but resolute. "Then let's make sure it finds the right one." And together, they stepped forward into the unknown as the world continued to burn and rebuild in their wake. Solmaris Ruins, the edge of legacy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the ruins of Solmaris. The city, once a symbol of power and control, now lay in tatters, its skeleton just beginning to heal. Yet in the heart of its destruction, Kale stood, watching the world around him shift into something he couldn't quite grasp. Kale had always believed that destruction was a necessary evil, that to rebuild, one must first tear down. But now, standing at the cusp of a new world, he wondered if there was something more to it than just fire and ash. He had burned away the old order, shattered the cycles that had ruled Orenia for millennia. But was it enough? Or was this a mistake? His hand rested on the hilt of Ashen Flame, the sword now silent, as if even it could feel the weight of the choice that lingered over him. Lyra, ever by his side, stood quietly as well. Her sun veil feather shimmered softly in the fading light, a reminder of the journey they had walked together. She had seen the toll the world destruction had taken on Kale, but she also saw the potential for what could come next. "The fissures are stabilizing," Lyra said, her voice soft but carrying the quiet authority that had always been a part of her. "But the world is still fractured. People are looking to you, Kale. They need guidance." "I didn't ask for their need," Kale muttered, his voice edged with bitterness. "And I don't want it. I can't lead them. I don't even know where to begin." Lyra turned to face him, her eyes softening. "You've already led them, Kale, through the hardest trial anyone could endure. You broke the chains of the system. You shattered the eternal cycle. Now it's not about leading them with power. It's about showing them how to find their own path, how to choose for themselves." Kale didn't answer. Instead, His gaze shifted to the horizon, where the first flickers of a new dawn began to burn through the darkening sky. The final trial, a world unbound. The crownless core pulsed beneath Kale's chest, its hum filling the silence around him. The three paths it had shown him still loomed in his mind, each one a possibility, a choice that would shape the future of Arena. The throne of order, the shadow of self, the flame walker. He had chosen to burn away the old system, to erase the throne and all it represented. But the shadow of self still whispered in his ear, calling him to erase every remnant of the past, to tear it all down and start for nothing. And then there was the flame, the path of creation, the path of guidance, the path that would leave the world scarred but free. Kale closed his eyes, drawing a deep breath as the weight of it all settled on his shoulders. The world no longer had a system to follow. It had no ruler, no law, no divine order. It was a world that had to find its own way, a world that was free, but also fragile. "I can't fix this," Kale whispered. "I can't undo the damage I've done." Lyra stepped closer, her presence grounding him. "No one can, but you can help them heal. You can guide them, not with power, but with understanding. The choice isn't about fixing everything. It's about showing them that they can fix themselves." Kale's fingers brushed the hilt of his sword again. The flame that had burned within him since the first moment he awakened had not gone out. It flickered now, but it was different. Its fire was not one of destruction, but of potential. "I won't be a king," Kale said, his voice steady now. "But I will be a guide, a flame that shows the way. I'll walk the path, but I won't control it. If I must burn, I will burn to light the way forward. And if they follow, it will be because they choose to." Lyra smiled softly, the weight of the world seeming to lift from her shoulders. "Then you've already made the right choice." The fissures and the fight for a new world. All across Arena, the fissures continued to open and close, the remnants of the old world still clawing at the edges of reality. But in the wake of Kale's decision, something shifted. In Ember Deep, Drake stood watching the chaos unfold. The Wormkin were eager for a leader, someone to unite them, to lead them into a new era of power. But Drake knew that Kale would never be the answer they sought. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a god. He was something else, something the world hadn't seen before. The question was no longer whether Kale would lead them. The question was whether they were ready to follow. In Lyriel's Divide, Vale Solane felt the same shifting currents. The world was moving towards something new, something uncertain. The fissures were not just rifts in space, but rifts in time. They weren't just destroying the old world. They were creating a new one. "Everything we knew is gone," Vale said quietly, her voice low but resolute. "But maybe that's what we needed all along. A world without a past. A final decision, to be the flame or to walk away." The final choice was Kale's. The world had burned, and now it was reborn. But it was not enough to simply walk away. It was not enough to leave it to the winds of fate. The flame still burned inside him. He could feel it pulsing in his chest. It was a fire he had wielded, and now it was his to control. But control wasn't the answer. Freedom was. With a final glance at the ruined city that had once been his home, Kale turned to Lyra. "Let them choose," he said softly. "Let them build what they want. I will show them the way, but I will not make the choice for them." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "Then let's walk forward, Kale, together." And as the world around them began to heal, Kale took his first step into the future, not as a ruler, but as a guide. A flame that would light the way for those brave enough to walk it. Arena, Sky's Edge, dawn of a new era. The sky was still burning. Even though the war was over and the Eternals were gone, remnants of divine conflict lingered like dying stars across the atmosphere. Radiant clouds spiraled above the horizon where the sun tried, and barely succeeded, to rise. The world was no longer bound by the system, no longer guided by chains. And yet, Kale Arclight stood alone on the edge of Sky's Edge, the highest cliff overlooking what used to be Solmaris's northern crest. Wind tugged at his tattered coat. His hair, now streaked with silver from resonance burn, shifted like ash. In his hand, the ashen flame blade rested, not drawn but no longer sheathed either. Its core had changed. It was no longer just a weapon. It was proof. Proof that a man could become more than a vessel. That power didn't have to corrupt. That destiny didn't have to dictate identity. Behind him, the others waited. Lyra, Drake, Zara, Vale, survivors from across the 7 regions. Not followers, not subordinates. People, witnesses, equals, waiting. The system's last whisper. Crownless core status. Fading. Legacy burn resonance. Finalized. Choice sealed. Path. Flamewalker. Message. There will be no next cycle. Question. What remains after the fire? Kale didn't answer it. Not because he didn't know, but because this time, he wasn't the answer. The people of Arenio were. The final council. A circle formed at the heart of Sky's Edge. Not a throne. Not a council of dominion. Just a gathering. Leaders. Warlords. Scholars. Fisher-scarred veterans. Survivors. Zara stood first. Her voice was calm, like smoke curling around a secret. The Arkvale archives are unlocked. The truth is known. The system was born of fear. Cycles to control outcomes. Eternals to enforce obedience. And we were always just the echo. Drake's gauntlets crackled. He stepped forward, brash as ever. Then screw the echo. Let's stop waiting for someone to tell us what to do. Let's build it our way. No kings. No gods. Just strength, honor, and grit. Vale, scarred and half-armored, nodded once. And law, or we fall into chaos again. A silence. Then Kale stepped into the center of the circle. Not to speak. To place the ashen flame blade on the stone. His voice carried not with power, but clarity. This blade killed an eternal, he said. But it won't kill the future. I won't rule. I won't build a system. That's not mine to do. He looked up, meeting every eye. I lit the fire. Now it's yours to carry. A world without system. The crownless core shattered that evening. Not in destruction, but liberation. A pulse of ashen light burst across the sky. It didn't kill. It didn't dominate. It simply burned away the last traces of divine tether. The system faded. Not erased, but concluded. Aura still flowed. Power still existed. But without templates. Without cycles. Without enforcement. Freedom didn't come as a reward. It came as responsibility. The burning sky. Weeks passed. The first self-governed sanctum of Aurenia rose from the ashes, built on top of the ruins of Solmaris, not in its memory, but in its honor. A coalition of peoples, cultures, classes. They called it the Emberlight Accord, a promise that power would no longer be inherited, but earned. Drake became the first warden of the South. Lyra founded the Dawn Spinners, a healing order that taught aura as empathy, not weaponry. Zara disappeared again, but sometimes Kale would find faint echoes of her presence. Warnings in the wind, smoke signals in the dark. And Kale? He left. He walked. Through fissures. Across regions. Sometimes guiding. Sometimes watching. Never ruling. And one day, in a quiet village that had never known what the system was, a child with no aura approached him and asked, "Are you the Ashen King?" Kale smiled. "No," he replied. "Just someone who lit a fire once." Final line. If I must burn to light the path, then so be it. Just don't forget why. The world had shifted, not just reshaped, but ripped open. After Kale, Arclight stood triumphant over Valai at the throne of dust. The Eternal's chain had shattered. But victory was never without consequence. Across the 7 regions of Aurenia, something stirred. Something older than names. Older than gods. Older even than the concept of aura itself. Lyriel's Divide. Underneath the crimson spiral, a dormant cave once sealed with eternal glyphs began to breathe. The air shimmered. Stone fractured. And then, silence fell. A woman floated above the abyss, her body suspended by threads of scarlet aura. Her arms outstretched, her eyes stitched shut by glowing sinew. Each breath, she took unraveled symbols in the air. Name, Cerethis the Threadwoven. Title, Seamstress of Fate, Eternal of Threads and Lies. Aura type, Bloodstitch / Deceit. Relic, spindle of whispers. She whispered, and the cave echoed with 10,000 voices, all weeping. Her domain, the loom vault, opened to the world once more. The cycle fractured, and thus I sow again. Zenith's reach, celestial ruins. A glacial beam of light struck down from the sky, rupturing a once dormant sanctum lost in the clouds. A man cloaked in silver armor knelt before a monolith of time. His body flickered between ages, child, elder, soldier, ghost. Reality itself struggled to hold him in one form. Name, Cauldron the Everworn. Title, Eternal of Time's Ashes. Type, Chronoflare. Relic, Auerbein Crown. One mortal broke the spiral. Now, I remember too much. He opened his palm, and the air slowed to a halt. Dusker wastes, beneath the hollow dunes. A shadow erupted beneath the sands, not cast by light, but by memory. A creature slithered out, its form serpentine and crowned with skulls. Its voice was neither hiss nor growl, but a language older than thought. Its presence silenced the desert winds. Name, Mayurak, the Grave Weaver. Title, Eternal of Forgotten Kin. Type, Bone Echo/Sand Shroud. Relic, Ancestral Maw. Thousands of buried bones around him stirred, rising, walking, remembering. Kale Arclight, the Ashen Flame. We remember your fire. Back in Noctheron Marsh. Zara Valeth, cloaked in cursed mist, turned her head slightly. Her wraith bell rang once. She smiled. The game has begun again. Final scene, a shadow beyond worlds. Far beyond Aurenia, in a place where sky touches thread and memory bleeds color. A lone figure sat cross-legged on a floating reef of starlight and bone. A boy, barefoot, silent, eyes closed. His breath was calm, but each inhale shook a continent. He exhaled, and 7 galaxies flickered. Someone is breaking the weave. I'll meet him soon. Name, redacted, but we already know him. His name is Sam. In the deepest fold of Aurenia's forgotten realm, past where maps bled into myth and names faded into static, the loom's citadel began to hum. Not with music, with madness. The threads of reality, once neatly spun by unseen weavers, twitched violently in place. A vast, circular chamber, once dormant beneath centuries of stone and sorrow, now breathed. The air shimmered. Web-like strands of golden filament pulsed in rhythmic sequence, suspended between obsidian pillars carved with ancient eyes. Some watched, some wept, and at the center, in a cocoon of knotted fate, something laughed. Not aloud, but through the warp and weft of space itself. Cerethis, the thread woven, was awakening. Somewhere else, Zenith's reach. Kale stood atop a jagged bluff, arms crossed behind him, his cloak rustling against a sharp wind that carried ash and truth alike. His body still bore marks from his final confrontation with Valith, though no longer wounds, they were warnings. His aura, once flickering with raw, chaotic growth, had settled into a low simmer. Not dormant, never that, but listening. Below him, what once was a dungeon crater now boiled with unstable energy. Ethereal lights spiraled upward, screaming into the heavens. The world loom was stirring. Again, what do you see? Zara asked, materializing beside him in a drift of cursed mist. Her hood was pulled low, but her eyes were focused. Kale's voice came after a moment. Threads unraveling. Ones I didn't pull. Zara's fingers twitched by her side, as if echoing the twitch of the loom. Then the others are waking. Back at the loom's citadel, the cocoon split. A single strand snapped, releasing a cascade of thread that twisted into form. Not flesh, not bone, but a woven body, constantly unraveling and stitching itself again. Never the same, yet never changed. Cerethis rose on legs that looked like dancing silk and bone-stitch puppetry. Their voice tore through the chamber in thousands of overlapping tones. Ah, which future is this again? The one where I die, or the one where I don't? Their hand, if one could call it that, lifted toward the glowing map of the continent suspended in thread. Every region flickered. Every name burned. Cerethus chuckled. Kale Arclight, you burned your way to freedom, didn't you? You tore my brother Veyne from the strings. The loom bent. One string snapped. Somewhere in the world, a child was born without fate. Another string twisted. A monarch fell dead mid-sentence. And far beneath Cerethus' chamber, the seals around Cauldron's tomb shuddered. Meanwhile, Noctheron Marsh, a soft violin played. Notes without a player drifted through a grove of rotting trees and whispering bones. At the center of a sunken field, a man sat cross-legged atop a coffin. Skin pale as starlight, robes made of stitched shadow. His fingers moved in ghost-like precision, guiding a bow across invisible strings. Mayurak, the grave weaver, opened one eye. "They're awake," he said to no one. How rude. They didn't wait for the final elegy. Return to Kale. Kale stood alone now. Zera had vanished, and the wind carried voices only he could hear. Ashen child, you're no longer bound to this world, and yet its fate is bound to you. He looked down at his hand, no longer fully human. The flicker of aura coiled and cracked like living flame around his fingertips. I thought it was over, Kale muttered. The world answered. It never ends. Not for one who burns threads. Threads are nothing but lies we choose to wear. Unknown Weaver proverb. The loom's citadel, present. Time didn't flow in the loom's citadel. It fractured. Cerethus the thread-woven walked barefoot across the vibrating strands of the loom's core, each step reshaping a potential outcome. Where their feet touched, sparks of forgotten memories burst and faded. Lives that could have been, lives that never were. Their body was unstable. A humanoid outline made of fine gold-silver thread constantly sewing and unsewing itself. Faces of the long dead blinked into existence on their form. A hero here, a tyrant there, a sobbing child stitched into their ribs. And through it all, Cerethus laughed. Chaos breeds artistry. They whispered, voice split into 3 tones. Male, female, and something else entirely. And artistry requires an audience. Their hands moved like a puppeteer on a cosmic scale. Threads launched outward, disappearing into the realm of men. With a flourish, they tugged. In Solmaris, a noble preparing for coronation collapsed, strings of light erupting from his skin before he turned to ash. In the Dusker wastes, a legion of Warden-class mercenaries suddenly dropped their weapons and wept blood. Above them, a single rune spiraled into the sky, the mark of Cerethus. In the etheric spire, elder mystics paused in the middle of a ritual. One screamed, "The weft has cracked," before his body was stitched into the floor by threads from his own shadow. Back in the loom's citadel, Cerethus clapped once. Reality itself seemed to wince. Ah, that should draw him, they cooed. The Ashen Flame, the Stitch Breaker, Kale Arclight. The name tasted like charcoal and broken promises on their tongue. He tore the loom by surviving. Now, let's see if he can mend it or fall deeper into the knot. Elsewhere, aboard a Skyfong, Sunspire-class airship, Kale sat in meditative silence, knees folded on the deck as aura coiled around him in ghostly embers. The skyship glided through thin ether winds high above Alarith peaks. Around him, the crew gave him space, not out of respect but fear. Lyra Solvine stood nearby, arms crossed. "You felt that, didn't you?" she asked quietly. Kale's eyes opened. They were no longer normal. In them, stars flickered. Faint glyphs spiraled in his irises like cogs. A thread was pulled, Kale muttered. Lyra nodded. And not just any thread. World lines are fraying. Even the relic priests are panicking. Drake nor dropped from the crow's nest, landing with a heavy thud. They say a name now, one I haven't heard in any war record. Kale rose. "Cerethus," he said flatly. Drake's jaw tightened. "That's the one." Lyra shivered. "We need to find the source, before they stitch more lives into whatever nightmare they're crafting." Kale looked toward the horizon. "No," he said. "We don't find Cerethus. We make them find me. Under Spire, Forbidden Archive. Deep within a vault where even time feared to flow, Zera Valeth stood before a cracked mural. It depicted a tangled being at the center of a dying world. its threads wrapped around every continent. "The archivist tried to erase you," she whispered, fingers brushing the mural. "But they failed." Behind her, the wraith bell chimed. They all fail in the end. Back to Cerethus. The thread woven now stood before a gate of fractal steel, one only they could open. Inside lay something older than the loom, a tapestry of Kale Arclight's possible deaths. Cerethus grinned and plunged a hand inside. "Let the stories begin to unravel. Time is the armor I wear, and suffering is the metal it's forged from." Cauldron, upon his first emergence. Lyriel's divide, depths of the Riftscar barricade. The earth screamed here, not from pain, but exhaustion. Centuries of battles, seals, and aura experiments had scarred the very bones of the continent. Ruined watchtowers jutted from the canyon walls like broken teeth. The once sacred land was now just a husk. Yet beneath it, something stirred. A heartbeat. Slow. Relentless. Thud. Thud. Then, silence fractured. The ground exploded. Out rose a titan of iron and agony. Cauldron the ever-worn. He wasn't merely clad in armor. He was the armor. Towering over 20 feet, his body was fused with rusted plating, cursed chains, and shattered relics embedded into his limbs. Screaming faces of fallen warriors flickered across the metal, their souls bound within the seams. From his chest, a furnace-like glow pulsed with each breath. A constant hum of grinding gears and echoing screams followed him. His voice was thunder buried in centuries of regret. "I was forged to suffer. Now I rise to make the world remember." Elsewhere, Ashvault Monastery, Arena. A hidden monastery deep within the Alarith Peaks crumbled as bells tolled with no hands. Dozens of monks fell to their knees, weeping blood. The high priest muttered, "The chain of time has broken. The ever-worn walks again." Sunspire Vanguard, Mobile Operations Command. Kale stood with arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the seismic readings. Mountains had shifted, fault lines rewritten. Survivors spoke of a walking relic made of pain and time. Drake slammed a gauntlet on the map table. "This one doesn't just kill. He curses everything he touches. Cities, bloodlines, even memories." Lyra's voice was low. One survivor said something strange. Said the Eternal kept whispering a name. Kale turned. "Whose?" Lyra hesitated. "Arclight. Back in the Riftscar." Cauldron knelt beside a crumbling grave, his own. The name was eroded from the stone, but he remembered. Not his human name, but the name whispered in his final breath before he was made to wear eternity. "Arclight, you left me to rot at the edge of the rift. Now I will wear your name as my final war cloak." He stood. Chains erupted from his back like serpents. The sky dimmed. Trees aged in seconds. His next step cracked the land, and every creature nearby felt the weight of centuries crash down on them like iron. Unknown location, Whispervale. Zara Valeth met with an old Veyne Guild War seer, her wraith bell pulsing dimly. "Cerethus threads the story," Zara said, "but Cauldron burdens it. He doesn't alter fate. He makes it heavier." The war seer turned pale. "He's not an eternal." Zara narrowed her eyes. "He's a grudge given form." Kale, final panel. Standing atop a cliff as a blood-orange sunset bathed the world in ember light, Kale tightened his grip on ashen flame. "The past wants me to kneel," he muttered. Drake grinned beside him. "Then let's make it bow instead." Far below, Cauldron's shadow crossed the horizon, each step louder than thunder. The living speak in lies. The dead? They whisper truths the world fears. Mayurak, to the last morn keeper of Dusker Wastes. Nocturne Marsh, Blackbone Hollow. It was silent. No birds, no wind, no time. In the center of a mire so ancient that maps dared not name it, a tomb cracked, not from force but will. It had been waiting, buried beneath rot, bone, and the forgotten screams of war. The ground bloomed with black lilies, flowers said to only sprout where the line between life and death was blurred. Then came the laugh, soft, dry, like breath over parchment. A hand emerged, pale gray, skeletal, yet cloaked in flowing aura threads made of grief and memory. The earth shuddered. From beneath, a cloaked figure rose, draped in burial garb from 100 fallen ages, stitched together by aura sinew and bound to a spine-like staff adorned with funerary bells that never rang. Mayurak the Grave Weaver, the Eternal who did not fight the living. He recruited the dead. Meanwhile, at Zenith's reach, Kale stared out from the shattered watchtower, his breath fogging in the morning frost. He hadn't slept. Zara stood beside him, her wraith bell trembling. "He's stirring now," she whispered. "Mayurak," Kale muttered. "The Grave Weaver. He doesn't want land or glory," Zara added. "He wants remembrance, and he'll take it one corpse at a time." Dusker Wastes, abandoned battlefield. Once a graveyard of titans, now a living altar. Bones rose from the sand, rearranging into effigies. Fallen wormkin skeletons crawled from the dunes, eyes lit with violet flame. Echoes of forgotten generals shouted in silent formation. Mayurak walked through them, humming a lullaby not heard in over 1,000 years. As he passed a shattered sword, it reformed and hovered beside him, carried by the soul still bound to its metal. He touched the skull of a long-dead king. "You were betrayed. Serve again. This time, I shall remember your name." The king's skeleton knelt. Sunspire Vanguard Emergency Summit. Drake paced like a caged beast. "We're not fighting monsters anymore. We're fighting history." Lyra stared at the growing reports of graves opening worldwide. "He's not summoning the dead. He's waking them up." "Then we silence them again," said Kale. But his voice was colder than usual. Not fear, recognition, flashback, unknown memory, Kale's past life. In a war long erased from books, Kale stood atop mountains of the dead. At his feet, Mayurak, once a general, once a friend, bled out. Kale whispered, "Forgive me." Mayurak only smiled. "Just remember me." Then darkness. Present. Noctheron Marsh. Mayurak raised his staff. The bells rang, not by wind, but by will. Across Arena, corpses flinched. Warriors, lovers, heroes, villains, all remembered, and all heard his call. Final panel, Kale's reflection. He stood alone under moonlight, ashen flame humming softly. One wore the past like armor. He looked to the south, where the dead now marched, and one wove it into war. The world trembled, not from war, but from silence. In the aftermath of Nithris's awakening, the skies above Arena seemed permanently dimmer. Moonlight shimmered not as illumination, but as a warning. Across the 7 regions, high-tier resonance stood restless. The atmosphere crackled with something that had no name. Not dread, not awe, something worse, anticipation. Lyriel's Divide, Sunspire Vanguard's inner sanctum. Vale Solane stood beneath the shifting banners of the Sunspire Keep, eyes narrowed at the celestial map flickering on the dome above her. Lines of constellation thread blinked in and out like a faulty heartbeat. 2 awakened, 3 distortions, and 1 breath waiting to fall. Her words echoed across the marble chamber. Lyra, now fully recovered, entered quietly. Kale's silence is worrying. Vale nodded. He senses it too. The world is holding its breath. Before Lyra could respond, the floor beneath them cracked. Only slightly. Barely noticeable. But for 2 high-ranking resonants, it was enough. The world line was thinning again. Noctheron Marsh, edge of the Rift Vale Basin. Kale Arclight stood at the edge of a reflection that wasn't his. A pool of obsidian water shimmered beneath a hollow sky. His distorted reflection no longer wore flesh. It was aura, drifting in controlled fragments, surrounded by fallen glyphs and haloed fire. But this wasn't his absolute ashen form. This was something deeper, an echo. "This isn't me," Kale muttered. But it was. From behind, Zara Valeth approached with uncharacteristic hesitation. "What you're seeing might be a remnant of a timeline Nithris erased, or one you're yet to create." Kale's grip on ashen flame tightened. "You think I care about timelines?" "No," Zara whispered. "But the one watching us does." Interlude. Hollow Lyricum elsewhere. Nithris stood atop a stage of broken obsidian, where musical notes floated like dying fireflies. A harp made of fractured bone and comet thread rested in her arms. Behind her, the curtains of time pulsed like lungs. She plucked a single note, and across Arena, a mountain exploded into memory. Alarith Peaks, mid-ascension tier dungeon collapse. A team of high-level Vanguard elites, led by Warden Cavra, was suddenly engulfed in a storm of sound. Reality reversed for a split second. Time played backward, then forward again, leaving only one survivor. Cavra stood in stunned silence. The dungeon didn't just collapse. It never existed. Elsewhere, Zenith's reach. Drake Nor, resting near a fading flame shrine, opened his eyes as his infernal gauntlets flickered. "Something's wrong with the sky," he muttered. He stood. The clouds above rippled. Something else was coming. Something far more violent than Nithras's erasure. Ember Deep, chamber of echo fire, sealed for 900 years. At the lowest depths of the Ember Deep chasm, a shrouded vault pulsed for the first time in centuries. Cracks webbed across the obsidian gates, and an ancient heartbeat returned. It was not Nithras, not Cerethus, not Mayurak, not Cauldron. It was older, and it was angry. Kale's vision. In a dreamlike trance, Kale stood before a throne made of black stardust, orbiting shards of planets long forgotten. A being of fragmented geometry and endless eyes stepped forward, its voice the collapse of constellations. "You've slain Eternals, little Revenant, but now you stand at the edge of origin." Kale narrowed his gaze. "Who are you?" The being's face split into three, one smiling, one screaming, one weeping. "I'm not named. I am what even the Eternals feared." The stars behind it collapsed inward. "Come, Kale Arclight, and learn what your ashes truly burn away."